Reborn. Evolving from Nothing. Chapters 161 to 170. Chapter 161. Fast Progress. Swish, swish, swish. I'm hit. It's a raid. Everyone ready up. It must be the target. Yells of pain lit up the night, underscoring a fierce voice attempting to establish order on a large mountain outcropping on the normal world of Yafik. It was just past midnight on the planet, several hours into their normal sleep cycle for most of the yelling shades. Enemy attack. Yafik was one of the western worlds of the Shade Commune. It wasn't one of the worlds that bordered other major powers, but was more than 20 worlds deep within Commune territory. It was very close to the central worlds of the Commune, the area directly controlled by the Shade King. The western worlds were typically overseen by the Western Duke of Shadow, Duke Ilka. However, due to the huge ongoing war that the Shade King was waging, the western worlds saw a large amount of movement from forces headed to fortify certain worlds or on patrol. The roughly 400 shades that were camped out on the mountain outcropping were all members of the official King's army, the premier force of the Shade King. Specifically, this was one of the self-defense scouting forces, or the SDSF as they were known in the Commune. These were powerful military groups assigned behind lines to patrol the worlds controlled by the Commune during the war, to hunt for spies or infiltrated military forces that might seek to cause chaos. The fact of the matter was, there were simply too many large world bridges and too many worlds for any major power to realistically block off all access. Therefore, sending out roaming groups full of powerful fighters and Fate Wizards on patrol was the next best option. Fate Wizards could help narrow down intruders' locations, especially considering almost all inhabitants of the Shade Commune were Shades. The rest of the group was composed of mystic martial artists and various wizards prepared for combat. Only 10 Lord-class wizards with this group, yet nearly 400 Grandmaster-class experts. A gruff, manly voice noted this. A quiet observation made as a cloaked figure looked down upon the chaotic campsite from a neighboring mountain several thousand meters away. In his hands was a slim, red wooden bow that glowed with faint red light. Shades have to train hard to reach that class. They aren't like vampires, though they have it better than humans. Still, I suppose when your total population exceeds 2 trillion and your natural growth reaches Sky class, there are bound to be countless experts below Lord class. The cloaked figure shrugged. If you hadn't caught my trail and started trying to hunt me down, I would have spared you. I can't afford to let myself be tracked yet, not when I'm only a few worlds away from the Shade King. My capture would only result in a horrible death. The cloaked figure sighed and shook his head. He had no illusions that he could match up with one of the strongest beings in all of existence. The Shade King, Hasith Shanti, ranked 5th on the recording of might. If I wipe them out with Ha'ai's final bow, I won't leave a trail behind and the Shades will be back to square one on tracking me. Even more assuredly if I use my summoning magic to enhance my control of it. He nodded. Their reaction proves they don't have any final contingencies that could obstruct me. It's time to end this. The cloaked man raised the bow, aiming it down toward the mountain outcropping nearly 5,000 meters distant. A rainbow-colored aura began to swirl about him, causing the ground beneath him to crack slightly as he readied himself. The rainbow aura that surrounded the man abruptly condensed, clinging tightly to his body. The air around him whipped back and forth as the rainbow-colored energy directly began to flow into him, vastly increasing the physical strength of the archer. This was the superstate of an inheritor of pride. The man's strength, defense, and speed were all vastly increased. In addition, his physical presence became overwhelming. He became a virtual embodiment of pride, a simple glance from him containing the weight of 1,000 kings. Allow me, leader, to test a technique I made just to target large groups like you. Leader began, aiming his bow slightly upward of the camp. Summoning magic. Ruler's bow. Summoning magic. Morph. Leader cast 2 spells in quick succession. An image of a transparent, wooden bow appeared and superimposed itself on Ha'ai's final bow. Immediately, the red bow seemed to grow more noble, gaining a sense of presence that it hadn't had before, becoming easier for Leader to control the powerful artifact. Leader raised the bow almost fully upward, pulling back on it. Energy swarmed around the air as a large, meter-long red arrow formed, natural energy condensing into it. He held this pose for several seconds as the shades in the campsite began to spread out and prepare themselves. Leader's eyes mentally tracked each and every shade, marking them. Suffer my rain of pride, attack. Whoosh. Leader unleashed the shot. The red arrow blasted off high into the air instantly, moving incredibly quickly. As soon as it was unleashed, it began to build up a massive amount of energy, drawing upon the laws of the universe as it moved to grow bigger and bigger. It sailed through the air until it was several hundred meters above the mountain where the shades were milling about. Boom! The arrow exploded as soon as it reached its apex, directly above the shade encampment. This explosion was huge, bright light and energy flashing into the night. It caught the attention of all of the shades as they looked skyward. And a moment later, from that explosion, came a beautiful rain of death. There were 406 shades as part of the force pursuing Leader. From that explosion, 406 blazing arrows came down, each one rippling through the air at a vast speed. The arrows crackled with energy as they hurtled towards the shades, leaving streaking trails of light in the sky. It looked like a magnificent and deadly storm of bright red light raining down upon the shades. By the heavens, get cover, shields up, no, whoosh. 406 arrows shot down with impeccable accuracy, each one hitting their target with pinpoint precision. There was no large explosion of energy, nor was the shade encampment obliterated. The arrows rained down full of deadly energy, but they made almost no noise as they swished through the air. Instead, those arrows almost silently pierced through the heart of each and every one of those 406 shades, obliterating any wizard's innate barriers, each one imbued with the law of pride and a massive amount of piercing energy. Plate armor, magic protections, shields, artifacts, everything in the way of the arrows was obliterated in one final impact. Of all the shades present, 2 of the Lord-class wizards managed to resist the arrow targeted at them for a brief moment. Green and blue light flashed around these 2 wizards as they desperately held off the attack for approximately 0.1 and 0.3 seconds respectively. After that, however, their resistance failed and both joined the rest as the red arrows pierced through their hearts, the hostile, imbued energy from the law of pride instantly spreading throughout their body and ravaging them. Thud! A collective, loud thud rang out as all 406 shades fell to the ground, weapons and armor falling lifelessly from their hands. Killed instantly. Wow! Leader muttered, his eyes widened as he looked at his bow. The faintly glowing red bow still had its majestic, enhanced appearance. A faint look of exhaustion could be seen in his eyes, but it wasn't as if he had no energy at all left. He had used roughly 1/3 of his energy in controlling and firing that attack. Enough to make him feel worn out, but not enough to drain him dry. Huya, your bow really was something else, huh? Even I wasn't sure if I could pull that off. That's an attack that is at least at the pseudo-angelic level. Leader took a quiet moment to look at the scene. The mountain encampment had become a mass grave. He shrugged. War is war. His body vanished as he began to jump and travel towards the encampment, leaving the mountain he was currently on. He had no pity for those that tried to kill him. In just a few moments, he crossed the several thousands of meters of distance, arriving at the now lifeless encampment. His body maintained its super state, as he readied himself to react to any threats. Leader quickly picked out all of the Lord-class wizards, snagging their spatial rings. He went through them, snagging anything of value or importance. He avoided taking anything that might be used to track him, only taking general items that might prove useful and reading any intelligence reports or plans. Oh, a new intelligence briefing? Leader finished searching the spatial rings of one of the commanding Lord-class wizards, the apparent fate wizard by his belongings, finding something of interest in his ring. A new hero has arisen named Lord Inigo? He is on a crusade to wipe out the ruins of the Demon Emperor and slay all demons? He is a holy avenger, a powerful swordmaster nearing the level of a saint intent on vanquishing the demon race in its entirety? Leader read from the report, his tone getting darker and darker. As he finished speaking, the rippling aura of pride that swarmed around him caused the air itself to tremble. This, Leader's hands shook as he crumpled up the intelligence report, incinerating it with a wave of his hand. That absolute villain, your existence itself is a blot on reality. How dare you say you will wipe my kind out? What have I ever done to you? And if he destroys the demonic inheritance before the Great Lord can get there? His words were dangerously calm, an undercurrent of rage hiding. Great Lord, forgive me. I will need to put my mission to find and join you on pause for now. His eyes flashed darkly. There is a shade I must kill first. Dorian shivered slightly as he rested in meditation, feeling unnerved for some reason. He shook the feeling aside, however, as he renewed his focus. Asra, is it possible to show my progress in absorbing and understanding the laws of the universe to me? Dorian queried. He was sitting down peacefully in a dimly lit wooden room, upon a large, comfortable plush bed. A second bed could be seen across from his, where Helena rested peacefully. Scanning, calculating? It's possible I may be able to project field estimates correlated to the amount of energy you have absorbed to project your progress at rough levels. My calculations would only be able to project an understanding in rough figures, and only up to 99% completion. Reaching 100% would automatically promote you to the king class. Dorian's eyes lit up. He hadn't thought about this before, but it made sense. The soul spell matrix genie in his soul was incredibly useful and could function in a similar manner to the theoretical I from Earth. Simply using her calculative power, it seemed it would be possible to estimate his rough progress. That's fine. Just show me my progress. I don't care if you can't give anything super specific. Acknowledged. Running parameters now. Law's progress. Law of valor. 21%. Law of mercy. 13%. Law of greed. 16%. Law of wrath. 37%. These percentages are rough estimates based on my preliminary findings. More information about each law is needed if you wish to confirm if these are perfectly accurate. Asra informed him quietly. I got it, he thought, nodding his head as he looked over the figures. They were similar to what he expected. He used the law of valor often because of its powers, so it made sense that it was one he understood a great deal. He had only recently gotten the law of mercy and his understanding of it was still limited. The law of greed he had gotten recently too, but he was a bit better about using it because of its effects on his soul. As for the law of wrath, it was the first real law he ever obtained. It was obviously the one he would know most extensively. The law of life and law of fire were two other laws that he'd had a tiny bit of experience with, but only through minor amounts of magic and the innate connections of some of his forms. Without experiencing a full Lord-class baptism, his understanding in either was negligible. But it's only 37%? He shook his head as he considered this, disappointed. How long would it take for him to reach king class? If regular practitioners had heard Dorian complain, many of them might have felt the urge to strangle Dorian. To be someone that was studying multiple laws already was something few wizards or mystic martial artists would even dream of. To master a single law to the extent Dorian had in such a brief amount of time. It was enough to drive even the staunchest experts insane with greed and jealousy. They might even have a chance to experience enlightenment and understand the law of envy solely from the trauma. The more you understand a law, the harder it will be to increase your understanding. The difference between 37% and 47% is not merely 10%. This will increase the closer you get to fully understanding a law. Asra sent him a notification, helping explain how the chart worked. Got it. That was the same as the info he'd gained in regards to reaching king class. The closer you got, the harder it was to advance. He took several deep breaths before relaxing. The world around him was silent and peaceful. He took a quiet moment to reflect. The past couple of days had been incredibly eventful. Things seemed to happen at an extremely fast pace, the progression he made frightening even himself. With his newfound fame being spread throughout the land, Dorian had become a figure of legend. And, upon learning that he really was being hunted and that the Anomaly 15 was going to try and obstruct him, Dorian decided to make use of that fame. He began to raise an army. He started out simple. Everyone was aware, apparently, that he was traveling to Moria. The rumors said he was on a mission to reach the demonic ruins and save his wife, with most of the other details lost or exaggerated in transmission. As Dorian boarded the flying ship, he began to let everyone know that he was raising an army, a force to help him conquer the Demon Emperor's ruins. As he traveled across the planet from this normal world to the world bridge that exited it, he let everyone know exactly what he was doing. Word was quickly spread thanks to magic and the many parties interested in him. And, as a result, powerful shades began to flock towards him. Thousands of shades were ready to throw themselves forward to join the journey of a man they saw as a heroic lord. The Church of Light's skill in spreading news and stories, and convincing the populace of the truth of those stories, was incredible. It was technically propaganda, but Dorian wasn't going to complain about that right now. Dorian also made it clear that he would accept only Lord-class wizards and above, largely cutting down on the number trying to directly join. While there could be great use in a large force at the Grandmaster class, Dorian was well aware that his leadership and strategic abilities weren't suited for large-scale command. At least, not without practice and training. By the time he made it across planet to the world bridge and passed through to the next world with a new chartered flying ship, reaching the next world bridge, dozens of Lord-class experts were waiting for him at the city he touched down in. Powerful experts were already swarming towards Moria due to hearing Dorian's tale. Upon learning he was actively recruiting an army, these folks rushed to sign up, pledging their allegiance. There were even 3 early King-class mystic martial artists that had joined his team. Dorian immediately placed each of the 3 as his captains, serving under him, and leading a third of the Lord-class wizards and mystic martial artists each. While Dorian personally had little experience leading such a force, the King-class mystic martial artists were all wizened experts, ready to lead the charge against the vile demonic remnants and cleanse Moria for the greater good. His army, which he named the Moria Liberation Force, grew stronger by the day. As he considered all of this, he saw that morning light was starting to filter in through the shuttered wooden window on the edge of his room. He was currently traveling through the night on a large-scale flying galley. The rowdy sounds of the crew working atop the deck just faintly filtered down as they became more active. A light knock drew Dorian's attention. He stood up from his meditation, glancing at Helena briefly. She was still quietly resting, her full focus on healing. He opened the door, slipping outside and shutting it quietly as he looked at the person outside. One of the 3 King-class mystic martial artists, an elderly shade named Fabian who was an expert with a long spear. "Holy High Lord Inigo," Fabian said, bowing slightly. Dorian mentally sighed. It seemed with every title he got, his name became more and more ridiculous. He turned his focus towards the mystic martial artist, examining him. The elderly man was completely bald, with a large brown mustache covering his lips. His skin was leathery, bulging muscles just hidden beneath it. "We have arrived at the final world before reaching Shaptal, the border world to Moria," Fabian continued. "The exotic world of Balians. The mysterious world of shattered dreams." Chapter 162 onward. The exotic world of Balians. The mysterious world of shattered dreams. As Dorian came up on deck of the flying ship, he carried himself with a proud, upright aura. He pulled ever so slightly on the law of valor, keeping it always just a bit active. The energy drain was negligible, but it did wonders for how he appeared. Dorian was well aware that if a person wanted to see something, that person would be more likely to see that thing, even if it wasn't actually there. The expectations these shades had for him was something he counted on. They all thought they would see a proud, majestic hero. And so that was how he appeared. The aura boost from the law of valor helped build this up. The shades came into this expecting something, and that is exactly what they came out with. Great hero Lord Inigo. Vast greatness Lord Inigo. Undying Emperor Lord Inigo. As Dorian came on deck, he was greeted with several muted cheers. A good dozen of the mystic martial artists that had joined Dorian's army were up top either admiring the view as the flying ship reached the end of the world bridge or just in conversation with each other. There were a few wizards that had joined Dorian's army, but almost everyone was a mystic martial artist. It was much easier to become a mystic martial artist than it was to become a wizard. "Greetings, my fellow soldiers. Praise the light." Dorian turned to the martial artists and nodded his head slightly, holding his shoulders square. All of these warriors wanted a piece of the glory of Dorian's journey, regardless of any danger. "Praise the light, kill the demons, woo." The warriors responded with passionate, but still muted cheers. Everyone on deck was aware that Dorian's wife, Helena, was injured and ill. As a result, even the loudest of the warriors kept a quiet tone out of respect. It was a remarkable show of discipline that left Dorian genuinely impressed. As Dorian moved past the martial artists, he walked up with the king-class warrior to the edge of the ship, near the front. He looked out past the edge, to what was before him. A grassy world bridge ended just a few kilometers away. He could make out the portal that allowed it to tunnel through chaotic space at the end. Beyond that, however, was a deathly, black and gray darkness. He could make out parts of the world bridge as it descended downward. But, eventually, everything else was obscured from his vision. The exotic world of Balians. The mysterious world of shattered dreams. He repeated the words, this time in his head. Most world bridges were heavily interconnected with others. That was how the worlds of the 30,000 worlds were designated. Worlds that had clustered world bridges were considered part of one region, while worlds that didn't connect were considered part of another. There was no true east or west in that regard, beyond the interconnectedness of the network of world bridges. Shaptal, the normal world that bordered Moria and was used as the base for those exploring the demonic ruins on Moria, was somewhat unique in that regard. Only 3 world bridges lead to it. One from a normal world that was very close to the southern part of the commune, more than 25 worlds away from Dorian's current location. One from a normal world situated closer to Dorian, 19 worlds away, but still within the southern part of the commune. And, lastly, one from the exotic world of Balians. In that sense, it could be seen as a huge shortcut. By taking this route, you could jump past an enormous number of worlds. For Dorian, who was on a bit of a time crunch, wanting to help Helena recover as soon as possible before she was discovered, traveling an extra 19 worlds sounded like a death sentence. Furthermore, all of the experts traveling with him believed that he was on an urgent mission, one where he couldn't afford to waste a single second, and especially not several weeks. For him to maintain his image, he couldn't afford to take any slow paths. Thus, this shortcut was his only option. Balians was not an extremely dangerous exotic world. It also, however, was not a safe one. The world of shattered dreams was a world that had been ravaged by one of the ancient high generals under the Demon Emperor, a demon known as the Dream Mentor. This demon specialized in magic that related to dreams. While this didn't sound like a particularly powerful field of magic, and, in the eyes of most, it wasn't, the Dream Mentor was a monstrously powerful figure. His mastery of dream magic was so complete and mighty that he was considered the greatest dream wizard to have ever existed. And it was here, on Balians, during one of the epic fights that decided the fate of the demon race, that the Dream Mentor died. Slaughtered under the blades of the 5 great heroes. You managed to kill him, but left behind the remnants for me to deal with. Dorian sighed, staring at the ominous entrance. I really don't have much of a choice. The exotic world was covered in a dream-like miasma that made reality itself seem distorted. However, to experts at the Lord class, or even experts at the Grandmaster or Master class, the dream miasma could do almost nothing to them. Even someone in Helena's condition would be completely unharmed by its effects. Only those at the Sky class or below might be adversely affected, and even then only slightly. The dream miasma just made visibility far more difficult. Apart from that, everything else would function normally. The side effects of the grand battle many years ago were widespread, but that didn't mean they were inherently dangerous. After all, while the Dream Mentor had been an angelic class wizard, he was one of the lower-ranked members among that group. He was powerful, but he was not a god. Even he could not intentionally cast a spell that could destroy an entire world. All they needed to do was fly for 800 kilometers in one specific direction, through the dream miasma, and they would escape scot-free. The world bridge to Shaptal was, thankfully, not too far from their starting point. The only thing they needed to worry about were the danger zones that were left over from the battle with the Dream Mentor. And it's possible I can just twist fate to make the journey easier. He thought, nodding his head. Perhaps it wouldn't be that bad. Holy High Lord, the flying ship we charted has been commissioned to take us all the way to Shaptal. Shall I give the order to proceed? From Dorian's side, the King-class Shade Fabian, known by his nickname Smiting Spear, spoke up, helpfully informative. Of Dorian's 3 captains, Fabian was, by far, the most talkative. The other 2, an elderly female and another elderly male, were much more taciturn. Dorian could sense the passion these elders had, however. It seemed they held deep personal feelings in regards to the demon race and approved of Dorian's mission enough that they chose to join him. Dorian glanced at the King-class Shade and then nodded. The ship had slowed to a stop, floating in midair through the power of magic as it looked forward towards the mysterious, dangerous world. Give the order. You heard the leader. Everyone, prepare yourselves. We are entering Balians. Be on your highest level of alertness while we are moving. The Shade barked out orders, in a voice that was somehow authoritative and spreading, but also muted. Here, onward, let's do this. A deluge of muted cheers greeted him and, slowly, the ship shifted forward once more, picking up speed as it began to fly towards the looming darkness in front. Here we go, Dorian thought, his face an expressionless visage. The last world till we reach Shaptal. On a world quite distant from Dorian's location, two great leviathans of the sky could be seen, soaring high above the earth below. Two mighty drakes that sent nearby beasts fleeing in terror at the mere sight of them. One was jade-colored while the other a dark, burnished gold. We're almost there now, Mira. The golden-scaled dragon let out a loose roar, speaking in Draconic as his wings thundered before him. Sparks of energy seemed to fly off his body as he flew, twirling chaotically in the sky. I know, I'm just worried, that's all. Mira replied, shaking her smaller dragon head slowly. Both of the two dragons were buffeted slightly by the furious winds that were crashing about them. They flew above a large sea of frozen ice, interspersed with large, towering mountains. The exotic world of Flauta, a frozen world covered in mountains. It also happened to be home to the agreed-upon neutral world between the Wise Jade tribe, the Golden Flame tribe, the Heavy Wing tribe, and the Green-tailed tribe. The Heavy Wing tribe, Mira thought, her draconic eyes tightening slightly. They were all dead, slaughtered in their entirety. Not a single drake that had been near the homeworld of the tribe remained alive. There were a few Heavy Wing tribe members that survived due to not being at home or being out on missions, enjoyment. But, in essence, the tribe was wiped out and dead. The 12 tribes were now 11. The tribe had been killed by a powerful, brutal being. A creature that called itself Zero, taking the form of a huge, towering lion with a bright, golden mane. A so-called anomaly, similar to the other anomaly, that was reported allegedly aiding and supporting the Red Wing tribe. Only, this anomaly here was decidedly not a friendly one. The Heavy Wing tribe had been famous for their defensive prowess. In terms of raw defensive power, not a single other tribe would be able to measure up. It was the niche their tribe had dominated. And, despite that, they were still all dead. It was a horrifying thought for her to consider. The duo flew silently for a few minutes, hurtling forward at an extremely fast speed. The cold weather didn't seem to have any real effect on either drake, brushing up against them to no avail. It reminds me of him. Mira made an observation as they flew, her voice quiet. Who? Aiden responded, glancing over at her. Her companion, the man responsible for the destruction of the demon race. She nodded. Ukeli of the Absolute. As she spoke his name, her entire body shivered. A second pause appeared as Aiden processed her words. They flew in silence for a few more moments, passing over a clump of drifting clouds. It doesn't matter who he is. All that matters is that he is an avowed enemy of our race. We cannot let the other tribes fall. Aiden responded, sighing. A seed of worry lay in his heart as he considered the dangerous being that was running amok. I know, Mira shrugged, a decidedly odd gesture on her relatively petite, but still large, draconic frame. This might serve as the stimulus we need to get the tribes to join back together. She took a new, more optimistic approach. Maybe, all we know, right now, is that this anomaly has moved on to the Red Wing tribe. You said a different anomaly has joined up with that tribe, right? I don't know how their kind works, but shouldn't those two be similar in power? Maybe they will kill each other. Aiden queried, his voice curious. I don't know. Mira shrugged again, this time helplessly. The information she had was limited, even when using the long-range communication artifact to hold several conversations back and forth. We should know more once we reach the convention. Her eyes flashed coolly. I still am surprised this is even happening. Myra's original plan had been to return to the headquarters of the Golden Flame tribe alongside Aiden, and report her findings to them first. Her own tribe, in terms of raw battle power, was one of the weakest among the 12. However, as they were returning home, they had been informed of this event, and even personally requested to join it. The duo had complied and made full haste here. To think that our longtime rival Arthur Tellman would send a personal representative here to talk about this incident and offer his support. She shook her head. What in the heavens is going on? Chapter 163 Safe Travel. Everyone, be prepared. We are entering the dream miasma in 5 seconds. A cool, authoritative voice sounded off, catching Dorian's attention. He and Fabian turned to look behind. Ah, Dream Guide Walter. Dorian nodded as he greeted the speaker. A tall, white-haired man wearing a full white suit stood before Dorian, staring imperiously out at the black and gray wall of twisting fog. He had a sharp face and eyes that were extremely alert. In preparations to cross through the exotic world of Balians, someone, Dorian wasn't quite sure who, had helped arrange for one of the most experienced explorers to accompany them. Dream Guide Walter was an expert that had studied the exotic world of Balians for more than 100 years. While his strength was limited to the Grandmaster class, his knowledge and experience set himself apart from others. Lordly hero Inigo. The Dream Guide walked up and bowed deeply in front of Dorian, his voice full of respect. He also bowed, though not as deeply, towards the powerful king-class mystic martial artist Fabian next to Dorian. "What can you tell me about this miasma?" Dorian asked, rubbing his chin. His actions made him appear to be a wise ruler contemplating the future. He had gotten a general overview of the exotic world a while ago, but hadn't quite realized the scale of it. The darkness they were flying into was much more daunting in person. Just as Walter was about to reply, the darkness overtook them. Their ship had entered the dream miasma. Whoosh! Eerie noises echoed through the air. An oppressive feeling coming off of the black and gray miasma spread out over the ship as it moved forward, traveling off the sheltered airspace of the world bridge. The light dimmed, everything fading slightly to a dullish gray, similar to Dorian's perfect body state. "It's not harmful, at least not in any direct way." Walter's voice exuded cool confidence as he nodded, waving his hand around. "It certainly is unnerving, but the miasma itself can do you no harm. It is merely an irritant. The real danger lies in the dream zones." The Dream Guide's voice sank slightly as he talked, as if trying to avoid the miasma overhearing him say the phrase, "dream zones." Oh, Dorian mentally rebuked himself for not preparing enough. He should have asked these questions ahead of time. Still, they had only just entered. This wasn't too bad a time to ask either. The dream zones are direct remnants of the attacks left behind by the Dream Mentor. Some of them are weak, while others are strong. All of them are weird and unsettling, though most of them share a common theme. The Dream Guide was informative, his words precise. Dorian turned away, looking out at the turbid darkness that surrounded them. He looked around in a circle, examining his surroundings. There was nothing visible, only the wavering grays and blacks. No shapes, no colors, no light. Nothing. In the depths of his heart, a deep-seated feeling of unsettledness took root. What would happen if I just jumped off? He thought, staring over the edge of the ship. The exotic world of Balians was still a world, after all. Land existed, just not visible through the dream miasma down below. They were flying roughly 1,000 meters above the ground. According to what he did know, the ground floor of Balians was full of marauding, dream beasts, that ranged from Sky Class all the way to Lord Class. They covered the entire planet, comparable to an entire race. Dream beasts were mindless and could only exist within the dream miasma. They had the appearance of wavering ghosts, vaguely shaped like various living creatures. How would I get home? He shook his head. The turbid darkness was impossible to see through. Getting lost in it was practically a death sentence. However, as long as one flew over the ground level of the world, the dream beasts couldn't harm or even affect you. None of them could fly, they were all landbound. "What are the chances we encounter a dream zone?" Dorian queried, glancing over at the elderly guide. "Quite slim, sir. The dream zones drift across the air and surface of Balians randomly. The chances of us stumbling upon one are less than 10%, going by the distance we are traveling." Walter nodded his head as he continued, gesturing forward. "We would have to be extraordinarily unlucky to encounter one. Fate itself would have to be working against us." As Dorian heard this, he squinted at the Dream Guide, and then looked off into the limitless miasma. "Damn it, man, you just jinxed us." He swore, his thoughts rumbling in his head. He then turned and shook a fist at the darkness and then mentally at his soul. "Don't you do a damn thing, soul. Just let us fly by quick and easy, with no danger." He thought with a sigh. "I better prepare myself. Knowing my soul, we'll end up encountering at least one of those dream zones." He sighed again. Alas, the life of an anomaly. Oh wow, that was far easier than I expected. I know, right? We didn't encounter even a single dream zone. All that hype for nothing. That Dream Guide really led us on. Dorian listened to the chatter from the warriors on deck, shrugging helplessly in agreement. Right in front of them, the turbid gray miasma was splitting apart to reveal the world bridge to Sheptal, their final destination. Their journey through Balians really had been far smoother than even he expected. At first, the flight had been rather harrowing. The atmosphere was oppressive and the dream miasma appeared everywhere, even within the ship itself. Dorian had ended up leaving the deck to stay protectively by Helena's side, refusing to leave her alone. Helena slept through most of the journey. In fact, she'd slept for several days in a row, her body and soul focused on recovery. Any time she spent awake could lead to her healing process slowing down or even reversing. Eventually, halfway through their journey, Helena awoke. In that 400 kilometers of travel, nothing much of note happened. There were odd screams and echoes that plagued the ship, and several of the crew members, fighters at the Master Class or Sky Class at a minimum, woke with nightmares. But there was no real danger. Dorian had even settled down to meditate, using the chaotic environment to temper himself. He'd run a small inventory on the contents of his spatial ring, planning out his future route. I'm starting to reach a point in my meditation for the Law of Wrath where I might want to turn to outside sources to speed up my progress. He'd decided, nodding his head as he looked at the golden shields, the highest form of currency in the Boral autarky, that rested in his spatial ring. The reason these coins were worth so much was because of the magical properties they possessed. They were infused with magic and rare minerals such that they became a unique artifact in themselves. They allowed one to gain a clearer and more full comprehension of the laws of the universe, speeding up one's meditation. At the lower stages of understanding, they would have little effect. But at the higher levels, where Dorian was slowly starting to reach, they could make it much easier to understand a law and absorb energy into one's soul. At roughly around 40%, or just a few points off from Dorian's current understanding of the Law of Wrath, Dorian would reach the Middle Lord class in regards to that law. At this stage, the difficulty in increasing the power of his soul and understanding from the Law of Wrath would jump. It was here he planned to test out the golden shields, to see how effective they were. Of course, he still had 3 other laws to draw upon to enhance his strength further, making him a ridiculous anomaly. An anomalous anomaly, one might say. Law's Progress. Law of Valor, 22%. Law of Mercy, 14%. Law of Greed, 17%. Law of Wrath, 38%. Not a bad bit of progress at all. He muttered as he examined the values, pleased. They had increased, slightly, across the board. He could feel his soul growing stronger and his understanding of each law growing more complete. What progress? A soft, feminine voice called out, catching his attention. Dorian's eyes widened and he spun around from his sitting position on his bed to look across where Helena rested. Helena, you're awake. Let me get you some food or water. He got up with a smile on his face, sauntering over. Helena's eyes had deep-seated exhaustion within them, but also a cheerful gleam as she looked at Dorian amusedly. Yes, I'm awake, and no, I'm fine. The meditative state I'm in lets me subsist on energy from the laws of the universe, purely focused on healing. My soul has made enough progress that I felt fine coming out for a bit. How long has it been? She asked. Just a couple days. You had me worried, Smalls. He replied, sitting down at the end of her plush bed. Helena blinked and then looked around the room. Just faintly, she could see ominous gray and black fog floating in the corners. The sway of the flying ship's movements through the air was melodic and hard to notice, but something that still caught her attention. Where in the 30,000 worlds are we? What happened while I was under? She responded, startled. Oh right, Dorian muttered, rubbing his chin. There are a couple of things I have to tell you. A few minutes passed as Dorian explained the situation. You are leading an army. Yep, you are leading an army. Yes, that is an accurate assessment of the facts. You are leading an army. I feel like we aren't making much progress with this conversation. Helena sputtered as she heard Dorian's nonchalant response, her eyes quivering in shock. She glared at Dorian as if he was teasing her, shaking a fist at him. How can you be the leader of an army, Dorian? Didn't you tell me back on Taprisha that you had little experience in the 30,000 worlds? She continued, her voice incredulous. She even leaned upward from her bed so she could get a good look at him. I pick up quick, he shrugged. Has it even been 2 months since that discussion? You don't just magically get the qualifications to be an army commander. That's dangerous, Dorian, she returned angrily. Dorian puffed up his chest, glaring at her imperiously. I'll have you know that I am the great hero Lord Inigo, the vast greatness, the undying emperor, the holy high lord, the ultimate great lord, the unstoppable ruler. As he spoke, he grasped a hold of the law of valor, an upright and noble aura burst forth from him. He gained the appearance of a wise and mighty ruler, one who would never back down in the face of adversity. Oh, shut up. Helena threw her hands up into the air in defeat, falling back down to the bed almost petulantly. Dorian grinned cheekily back at her. I just don't want you to get hurt. Helena's voice was far quieter as she spoke, her eyes holding hidden emotion as she looked back up at Dorian. Dorian felt warmth enter his heart as he looked down at her, looking past her withered appearance to see a beautiful, warm soul. You don't need to worry. I know exactly what I am doing. He had no idea what he was doing. Still, he figured he could wing it without too much worry if push came to shove. His primary goal was protecting Helena. Besides, all of these shades seemed eager to join his cause, and he did indeed want to explore Moria. All right, Helena muttered, her voice fading as she slipped back into sleep. I trust you. Rest well, Dove, Dorian muttered, calling her one of the many nicknames he'd come up with, as he watched her fall unconscious again, a seed of worry planted firmly in his heart. I'll make sure that trust is warranted. The next several hours had, again, passed by peacefully. Dorian continued to meditate, and in no time at all, Fabian had called upon him again, informing them of their arrival. And here they were, about to exit onto Shaptal. Is it really that easy? He muttered, looking at the world bridge they were fast approaching. They had just reached the edge of the dream miasma and were about to pass through it. This would be the perfect spot for an ambush from any last-minute dream zone. He thought, blinking slowly. His heart tensed up, his eyes alert and scanning the environment. Their flying ship shot forward, spurts of the foggy dream miasma pushed to the side. Eerie echoes and keening cries sounded off as they approached the end, a myriad of terrifying noises. Just 5 seconds until we're free, he thought, his fists clenched slightly. They had officially reached the thinnest section of dream miasma. The echoing cries seemed to grow in intensity, as if the exotic world was aware that they were about to leave and desperate to keep them there. 2 seconds, Dorian thought, a feeling of certainty rising in his heart. There was no way they were going to make it out this easy. 1 second, here it comes. He went on full alert, ready to draw upon all of his laws at a moment's notice. His perfect body ability was on a hair trigger, liable to be tripped from almost anything. Whoosh! They burst free from the dream miasma, entering the airspace of the world bridge. Dorian's pounding heart reached a crescendo as his head twisted from side to side, ready to respond to virtually anything. Nothing happened. Huh? Dorian blinked. The world ship continued to fly forward, unharmed and unabated. Woo! Finally free from that gross fog. Quickly, onward to Moria, vanquish the demons. It really was that easy. A set of muted cheers burst from the warriors as they celebrated entering the warm and friendly light of the world bridge. This specific iteration of a world bridge was a rocky, mountainous one, bereft of much vegetation. We have arrived safely, Holy High Lord. We are finally approaching our destination. The brown-mustached, but bald, king-class mystic martial artist Fabian cheerfully observed from Dorian's side, his aged voice full of excitement. Huh, yeah, that we have. Dorian shrugged. That had been rather anticlimactic. Oh well, let's keep going. His eyes flashed, eagerness filling them. On to Moria we shall go, my loyal subordinates. We shall conquer the demons. He raised a cheer of his own, imbuing it with the law of valor. Here, to Moria. Back on the exotic world of Balians, in the midst of the unwavering dream miasma, a vague figure could be seen, looking down upon a floating globe of vaguely clear crystal. This figure had a dreamlike humanoid shape that constantly shifted and changed in size and scale. The only constant was the powerful, king-class aura that rippled around it. And as that figure looked into the crystal ball, it looked down upon a familiar scene. A scene of Dorian and the members of his army all celebrating cheerfully as they exited through the world bridge, full of excitement. Fools, the dreamlike figure whispered, its voice harsh and grating. So many experts, yet so little wisdom. The figure continued, shaking its head. I suppose I can't blame them entirely. To think that they immediately fell into the life year's dream zone when they were less than 15 seconds into their journey. That is certainly a record. I wonder if I should call that lucky or unlucky. The figure shrugged. It made a vague motion with its hand, causing the crystal ball to shiver. Let's see. The life year's dream zone is only in its misdirection period currently, but I can fix that. It's a good thing I caught on to its activity. It's too bad my connection to the dream zones is lacking when compared to Master's. The figure sighed. It seemed to have a habit of talking to itself, one built up by long years of solitude. Now let's see. Where has it guided them to? The misdirection period should change their movements, causing twists and turns that lead them to a random location and what? The shadow figure abruptly stopped, pure incredulity filling its voice. It actually guided them all the way to the world bridge they were originally headed towards? This isn't just a dream illusion spawned by the dream zone? But how? That's ridiculous. Is the misdirection period still active? The vague humanoid cast a spell on the crystal ball, staring at it in confusion. It's still active, so they reached the world bridge they planned to reach through random chance. Are you serious? The shadowy figure hung its face in its hands, rubbing at its forehead. It was a being composed of almost entirely energy and was therefore physically unable to have a headache. Despite that, it felt one coming on as it looked at the sheer ridiculousness of this situation. The odds of them arriving at their planned destination while in the midst of the powerful magic misdirection period from the life year's dream zone, it should have been almost literally impossible. To actually arrive there was ridiculously unlikely. Far less than 1 in 1 million. Yet they still, somehow, made it there, and in record time too. Wow, they're about to escape the world entirely. They're already on the world bridge. Life year's dream zone. Activate quickly. The shadowy figure sputtered, its body blurring as it shot off in a specific direction at high speed. Leaving behind a crystal ball that began to glow with dark light, transforming the bright scene of Dorian and the cheering warriors into one swarming with darkness. Chapter 164 The Life Year's Dream Zone. All right, Dorian thought, grinning. The progress they had made was incredible and they hadn't even run into any snags. This was the kind of travel he liked. He'd managed to make it smoothly across multiple worlds without being stopped or attacked. So far, no one had really confronted him and things were flying smoothly. There was the sole exception of the anomaly named 15 attacking him. The confrontation with that anomaly had been dangerous and deadly, an attack that came out of nowhere. 15 had mentioned that he would be waiting for Dorian at the demonic ruins. The anomaly had also mentioned he had been sent here to investigate about him. He was clearly part of some greater force, not acting on his own. But who, or what? It can't be the Shade leadership directly or the Church of Light, otherwise they would have just acted out in the open. Therefore, it must be someone underground or hidden. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I don't think I've offended anyone nearby, save for the Church of Light. Are they only investigating me because of the scene I caused? He sighed. His biggest concern lay in fate. When he and Helena had ripped through chaotic space, Dorian was 100% sure they had left some sort of noticeable trail. Thus, after he arrived, the first thing he wanted to do was obfuscate that and move away as quickly as possible. Especially considering that Helena was a vampire, and the Shades were currently at war with the vampires. If the Shades here found out that Helena was not only a powerful vampire, but also in a weakened state, as well as one of the vaunted Aurelius Reavers. His eyes hardened. Dorian had no doubt that at least some of the Shades here would try to kill her. What do I do? What do I do? He thought, frowning. He didn't want to have to kill anyone or put people's lives at risk. But one of the few people he knew and cared deeply about in this universe was currently having her home and life put in grave danger. The Shades were even trying to wipe her race out, or at least her race's control of their worlds. Don't think of them as a monolith, Dorian. He reminded himself. Just because the Shade King was forcing the war didn't mean everyone else supported it. It only meant that the influence in the hands of the Shade King was considerable. Why did the Shade King have to go to war, anyway? He thought, frustrated. Why risk your people's lives? The commune already controlled a little more than 2,000 worlds. Would picking up a few dozen or so more really matter that much? Whatever petty feuds you had with their kind, couldn't you have just ignored or talked it out, and left your people in peace and harmony? He sighed again. He wanted to do the right thing. But he saw, now, that it wasn't always easy to find out what exactly that meant. I don't want to hurt anyone. But I will do what I need to do to protect her. Dorian's heart was troubled, but his mind was made up. Even if that meant being a bit dishonest and tricking several dozen shades into helping him get her healed and escape. It will be a bit of a long trip to Shaptal from here. A full 4 days' journey across this world bridge even with this fast-paced flying ship. This is one of the longest world bridges in the 30,000 worlds. The dream guide Walter spoke as he walked up next to Dorian, explaining some helpful info to Dorian from the side. The flying ship they were on began to progress up the world bridge, headed towards the glowing portal that separated it off into chaotic space, away from the exotic world of Balians. I'm aware, he was. The dream guide, as well as some of Dorian's newly formed Moria Liberation Force subordinates, had informed him a while ago about this. With his jade memory, it was impossible for him to forget. We'll just need to what is this? Whoosh. The world went black. Dorian blinked. What was that? Did I doze off? Dorian yawned as he cleared his eyes, taking in the surroundings as he came awake. He held up his clearly human hands, scanning them over curiously for a moment. All was normal. He was standing outside the Catalana Hotel by the water in Sydney, Australia. The sounds of water pressing up against the nearby pier were comforting, reminding him of the beach back home. I'm out with my parents and some cousins on vacation. They all went back in for dinner while I said I was going for a walk. For some reason, Dorian felt as if the world around him was oddly surreal. He rubbed at his head, massaging his temples. He took a few steps forward. People moved slowly past him. He saw a few couples admiring the view, a family laughing as a child chased after a seagull, and a pair of girls jogging past him. It was late afternoon, with the warm light just slowly starting to die down. He walked down the pier, smelling the frothy sea air. They were situated right next to the ocean, in a luxurious hotel suite his father had specially booked. In particular, their hotel lay near a small peninsula. Across the strip of ocean, another large and luxurious hotel could be seen, with various boats moving about in the water. It's beautiful, he thought, staring at the glimmering ocean water. Splash. He turned to his right, looking at a statue of a large, scaled lion. It was a fountain of some sort, shooting off water into the ocean. A lion. That reminds me of something. He muttered, staring at it curiously. Whoosh. A burning sensation spread through Dorian's head as he heard an unsettling keening noise echo out. He clutched at his forehead as this happened, groaning in pain. Sir, are you all right? One of the couples noticed Dorian as he fell to one knee. The speaker was a 30-ish looking woman with dark brown hair and a concerned expression on her face. She reached out with a hand to help him up, thinking he had fallen. Memories? My memories, Dorian whispered, ignoring her. The pain in his head continued, as if two parts of his mind were clashing. The pain continued to increase as he stood up, moving the woman's helping hand away. Grr! Dorian roared out loud, his eyes blazing. He clenched his fists, forcing his way through the pain with sheer willpower alone. Give me back my memories. His voice echoed like thunder, shaking the air around him. Boom! Abruptly, the painful resistance in Dorian's mind vanished. A millisecond later, a rush of memories flooded back into him. Memories of dying, here on Earth, and being transported to a strange new universe. Memories of becoming dozens of different creatures, of shifting forms and shapes. Of learning powerful techniques or creating his own combat attacks. Of making friends and defeating enemies. Memories that he could not forget. Memories that he would never want to forget, even if his creator claimed they were not his own. Dorian blinked, feeling his mind fully restore itself. He smiled. Jade memories, thanks for that. He spoke aloud, naming and thanking the ability that had come to his rescue. A lion. One of the rumors about that fallen draconic tribe was that it had been wiped out by an enormous lion. He muttered and then shook the stray thought from his head. So this is a dream zone, huh? How did it hit us on the world bridge? He looked at the incredibly realistic landscape spread out about him. Around him, several of the couples and families were all glaring at him askance thanks to his random outbreak. Some of them were taking their children away while giving him hushed glances, as if Dorian might be a threat to them. It tried to shake my memories away, or something like that. But, because of my Jade Memories ability, I can't forget anything. It's not possible. Therefore, the two opposing forces crashed, and I ended up escaping through some type of loophole. He nodded. It all made sense in at least that regard. After all, how many beings had an ability perfectly tailored to memory? Probably an extremely tiny number. Putting in a safeguard of some sort for that, if it was even possible, would most likely be considered a waste of time and effort. But what now? I'm still here. He looked around the pier for a moment before closing his eyes. The dream guide had stated that almost every dream zone varied. The key way to break out of any dream zone was to break the dream's core, which could mean anything depending on the person. Decidedly unhelpful advice. Whoosh! Raw, powerful energy flooded into Dorian's body, enhancing his strength and physique tremendously. The power from the law of valor condensed the energy into his veins and muscles, vastly increasing his strength. I can still use all my techniques, it seems. At least, I can draw upon the laws here. A feeling of relief appeared as he noted this. If it was like this, he had no fear at all. Asra, are you still here? He asked, internally. Yes. A cool voice in his head replied. Dorian nodded at the reply, turning his focus back to the world around him. According to the dream guide, while the dream zones could be dangerous if one was caught up in one, they weren't a death sentence. Indeed, most of the time one was caught in one, it was only a matter of escaping it and waking up. And even the Grandmaster class dream guide was capable of escaping from plenty of dream zones and had done so multiple times. Thus, Dorian wasn't too worried. Only, how'd I leave? He began to walk down the pier, ignoring all the people staring at him. Though Dorian didn't consciously notice it, his sense of self and strength of will had grown to tremendous levels over the time he had existed in the 30,000 worlds, partly due to the growth of his powerful soul. Even if 1,000 people were staring at him, he wouldn't be the slightest bit fazed. He walked away from the pier, over to the front of the hotel his family had been staying in. He could see several cars parked out in front. A few palm trees rose up high into the air, swaying with a light breeze. Oh wow, cars. It's been a long time since I've seen you. He muttered as he walked up to one of them, a red Toyota Camry. He tapped on its hood a few times, trailing his fingers over it. If he counted all the time he'd been in the 30,000 worlds, including the time he spent stuck in that mental prison when he was forced to heal his soul, he hadn't seen a car in years. Ting! He flicked the hood of the car very carefully, nodding as he heard a resounding metallic echo. This dream sure is incredibly realistic. He examined, frowning. If his Jade Memories hadn't restored his mind to him fully, Dorian had no doubt he would have been completely convinced that this was the real world. He moved away from the cars and entered the hotel lobby. Welcome to the Catalana, how can I help you? As soon as he entered, a woman standing at a receptionist desk greeted him warmly. She wore a tight blue dress with the symbol of the hotel on it. I'm good, thanks. He waved her off as he walked into and towards the center of the lobby, breezing past the reception. The hotel was an expensive one, finely decorated with large paintings and expensive art decorations. The hotel lobby was huge, with several large rooms, an open restaurant, and a circular pond all within it. This is exactly like my memories, Dorian said slowly, losing himself in nostalgia as he looked around. He walked up to the pond, looking at the various fish swimming around in it. In the background, relaxing music was playing while the cool breeze from an air conditioner swept over his body. Everything looked and felt similar to what he had seen and felt here, so long ago. Abruptly, his heart dropped as he realized something. His head twisted as he looked over towards the open restaurant in the lobby, his eyes scanning everything. There were about 3 dozen wooden tables set up, most of them half full. The floor beneath the tables was tiled, a peaceful gray color. A few seconds later, he found what he was looking for. A small family that was dining at one of the wooden tables. A woman that looked to be in her early 50s wearing a comfortable yellow sundress. She had long brown hair and cool blue eyes, with a ready smile on her face as she talked, animatedly, to the man sitting next to her. A man that had a strong jawline, with short brown hair and bright blue eyes, a man that looked very similar to Dorian's human form. His blue eyes were full of kindness and wisdom, well-worn laugh lines covering his face. His father and mother, Auntie Ella. Kelly keeps poking my hamburger. I did not, it was all Kyle, Dorian's hearing focused on that table as his powerful senses zeroed in, letting him hear a spurt of conversation. Conversation coming from the two other members at the table. A 12-year-old girl with long blonde hair tied up in a braid, and a 10-year-old boy wearing a set of bright blue swimming trunks. Ha ha ha, oh, you too. Kelly, don't poke your brother's food. Kyle, don't you poke her back. Dorian's heart ached as he heard the aged, but cheerful, voice of the woman speaking. A voice that brought back memories swarming inside him. Listen to the old lady, kiddos. He heard his dad reply with a hearty chuckle. Oi, who are you calling an old lady, you doddering fool? His mother spun around and glared at his father, wagging a finger at him. Dorian couldn't help but smile, grinning like a fool himself. That's right, on this trip, we took my aunt's kids with us, because she had to leave for a couple of weeks on a business trip. They planned this ahead of time. His eyes widened as he processed this, his eyes greedily drinking in the scene like a man lost in a desert drinking up water. This was identical. Everything was the same, even the minor details of life, like his aunt's children being at dinner with his parents. It was all exactly the same. Mother, father, Dorian stared at them, quiet and pensive. His hands shook as an overwhelming sense of longing filled him. I never got to say goodbye last time. Emotions swept through his heart as he saw them. Regardless of whether or not these memories were truly his own, Dorian had long since decided he would accept them as real. Seeing his parents again after so long, after everything he had been through. He closed his eyes, feeling his cheeks grow damp. His sudden death on Earth had been far too abrupt. Fate had chosen that time to claim his soul, departing him from the land he knew. There were so many things he wanted to say to his father, to say to his mother. To let them know that he loved them, to apologize for all the little things he'd let hold him back. Alas, as his heart shook with emotion, however, it also filled with determination. Ah, so this is the trap. Well laid, dream zone. This is not real. He opened his eyes and took a deep breath, forcibly controlling himself. Tears dripped down his face as he tore his gaze away from his family, not allowing himself to get caught up in the vision. As much as he wanted to, he knew he could not afford it. Not when Helena was depending on him. Helena? Dorian's breathing was erratic as he began to walk back through the lobby, feeling as if each step he took weighed 1,000 pounds. His entire body seemed to be screaming at him to stop, to turn around and hug his dad. To tell them about all he had gone through, everything that had happened, to let them know how much he missed them. If this were a simpler time, here on Earth, I would ask you on a date. He rubbed his eyes as his thoughts moved forward. He couldn't afford to let himself wait here even a moment. He pushed his thoughts away, focusing on Helena, the wondrous vampire that had quite literally fallen into his life. He closed his eyes again as he moved, doing everything he could to walk away. If he tarried, he feared he might not be able to turn away again. Though, maybe I could call this an extended date. After all, we did technically sleep together. Well, at least, we slept in the same room, though in different beds. Close enough. Probably shouldn't let her hear me say that, though. He high-fived himself anyway, managing to force up a small smile as he walked out of the hotel. As he left those doors, he felt a weight rise from his shoulders. It felt as if he had finally broken free from a past that was trying to drag him back. At the same time, however, a heavy feeling filled his heart. A feeling of loss, of loneliness, of melancholy and sorrow, as if he was giving something up, something he could not get back. He moved forward outside alone, his shoulders hunched as he left behind a family that he would never see again. Chapter 165 Escape. A feeling of sorrowful warmth spread over Dorian's mind as he walked outside. In that moment, as he let go of everything to continue his journey to save Helena, his soul went through a kind of cleansing. It was as if he was being reborn from nothing. At the same time, Dorian felt two of his laws seem to call out to him. The law of valor and the law of mercy. He blinked. An instant later, as Dorian experienced this type of cool enlightenment, he felt another energy source, one that resonated with the law of valor and the law of mercy. This energy source was one that was calm and peaceful, one that took hits and kept moving without pause, slowly and steadily. As he sensed the fleeting sensation of this energy source, Dorian was able to recognize it. The law of charity. He instinctively knew what law it was. The feeling vanished as soon as it arose, but left a permanent imprint thanks to Dorian's jade memory. "Ah, I see," he muttered, closing his eyes peacefully. His act of giving up everything that he desired here, to be reunited with his family, had sent reverberations through the laws of the universe. It seems laws that are linked together can act as a draw for other, similar laws. My soul's unique makeup and connection to fate makes it easier to sense other laws, and the fact that I'm studying two laws that seem to be interlocked and related are building off of each other. He observed, smiling sadly. He was happy to have sensed a new law, but the sadness of walking away from his family stuck with him. He sighed and kept moving. Honk. The sounds of the city jarringly interrupted his musings as Dorian walked out from the lobby to a street that connected to the hotel. A maze of vehicles and people were visible, flashing lights and fast movement everywhere. He tapped his foot lightly on the ground, the familiar feeling of a concrete sidewalk appearing. Crack. His light tapping had accidentally smashed the concrete sidewalk, cracking it. Bits of dust and rocks swirled around his foot. Whoops, Dorian muttered, apologizing to the floor. He'd forgotten that, when he channeled the law of valor, his physical form became abnormally powerful. Out in front of him, he could see a few police officers walking down the same sidewalk. When Dorian damaged the ground in front of him, the officers turned around and waltzed up towards him. They had appeared to be eyeing him already, a bit abnormally. Huh, hold on. These are American cops? Why would they be operating here in Australia? This is Australia, right? He thought, staring oddly at them. Hey, what do you think you're doing? One of the uniformed police officers, a burly man with short red hair and a small red mustache, walked right in front of Dorian, looking incensed. His right hand rested on his pistol as he yelled out, "Get on the ground." He glared at Dorian threateningly, jumping from 0 to 100 in mere seconds. What? None of this makes any awe. This is the Dream Zone's doing, right? A light of understanding appeared in Dorian's eyes. This situation wasn't at all from his memories. He recognized the police officers as cops from Texas, by their uniforms, though they appeared far more trigger-happy than he remembered. The Dream Zone operated using his own memories as its power. However, he had no memory of any Australian police officers. Thus, when the Dream Zone went to create a situation to take him out, they searched and found a different authority figure, one he did recognize. If I didn't have my memories, I would just be a regular human. I would probably be celebrating with my family right now, or at least talking to them in the hotel. If I die in here, I'm guessing I will die or take severe damage in real life. I would be a sitting duck to several armed and murderous police officers in a normal human's body. Dorian thought as he examined the police officers. All three cops had their hands on their pistol grips and were glaring at Dorian, yelling at him. Balance demon form, switch. Perfect body, activate, whoosh, open fire. The police officers opened fire in record time as Dorian's body blurred. Dorian blinked. Unfortunately for these cops, Dorian was anything but normal now. The world around him had lost a great deal of its color. This got balanced out quite a bit, however, by his balanced demon form's superior senses. His regular human form was only so-so at best. As the world transformed to become a bit duller, the law of valor and law of greed flushed powerfully in Dorian's soul and body, enhancing him. He didn't have the time to add the law of charity to his list yet, so he'd postponed that until after. Oh wow, Dorian muttered as he looked around him. Is it because of the Dream Zone? There's no way I'm this fast normally. The world around him was operating in incredible slow motion. The police officers had expressions of rage frozen on their face. In the air between them, 3 bullets were visibly moving towards Dorian, piercing towards him. Dorian blinked again and looked around. The world around him had become frozen. People froze in mid-step, fast-moving cars slowed to a complete halt. He could see traffic lights that would normally be blinking holding still, children frozen in mid-jump. It was incredibly surreal to see. The only thing that convinced Dorian the world wasn't completely frozen were the 3 bullets slowly hurtling towards his chest. Whoosh! The air around him quivered and then froze again immediately as he stepped to the side. He then tapped on the bullets as they flew past him, adjusting their path so they were shooting more towards the ground. Huh, perfect body, deactivate, he muttered, an idea coming to mind. Whoosh! The world around him returned to full speed. The frozen cars sped up to normal, people continued to walk. A good dozen or so nearby pedestrians all turned to stare at Dorian and the police officers, many of them fleeing as they heard gunfire. Whiz! All three bullets shot off into the distance. Get on the huh? The three police officers froze, staring at where Dorian had been. Thud! Almost as one, all three collapsed as Dorian's right arm knocked against their heads, downing them all in one smooth motion. The trio collapsed, falling down on the concrete. Murder! Somebody help! There's someone attacking the police. What is that? Yo dude, is this a movie? A deluge of voices sprang out as everything came to a head. Dorian ignored this as he turned around, headed back towards the pier. My perfect body ability let me slow down time drastically when it activated here, in this dream zone. I wonder why? He frowned as he walked away. After about 100 meters of walking, he reached the pier. The chaos from the police hadn't seemed to spread this far, leaving him relatively unobstructed. The ability description did mention that this ability is an incomplete divine ability. Maybe if I figure out a way to complete it, that is what it does. Or it could be something else entirely. He shook his head, unable to make heads or tails of it. It seemed the original plan of the dream zone was to have those police officers take him out after trapping him with his family. When that failed, it didn't seem to have anything else to throw at him, at least not yet. He would need to find a way to break the dream himself. People that saw him as he walked turned and stared, several taking out their smartphones to take pictures. Dorian's physique looked like a thing out of legends and myths, and therefore had to be some type of costume to most. Bro, sick cosplay. Mind if we take a group pic? He even got approached by a trio of guys wearing jogging clothes, one of them holding out a phone to take a selfie. Dorian stopped to pose with them out of politeness, holding up 2 fingers for the picture. He then mentally berated himself. None of these people are real? Why did I do that? Who cares if I appear as a nice demon on this Dream Zone's Facebook? He shook his head bemusedly, feeling a bit more cheerful. He breezed past the rest, walking to a spot near the end of the pier, back where he had originally started. He looked out across the sea, where the nice hotel on the other side gleamed lightly, sunlight reflecting off of it. Now that he looked closer, he saw that the hotel seemed to have, of all things, a submarine of some sort connecting 3 different towers to each other at the very top. Hey, I know that. Isn't that a hotel I saw when I visited Singapore? Why is it here? Parts of the dream weren't accurate, going to show how unreliable his memory, when he was a human on Earth, had been. That, or the dream zone was mixing things up haphazardly, unable to recreate everything perfectly. He turned to look at the statue of the lion resting to the side of the pier. An idea came to mind on how to escape this dream trap. You are not real, Dorian spoke aloud, staring at the statue. He pulled on his will, commanding his soul to twist fate. You are merely a dream. I command you to shatter. Break for me. Awaken. He held out his hand. Touching light. Activate. Whoosh. A sword made of pure, gleaming light appeared in Dorian's right hand. Dorian pointed it at the statue, glaring. Break. Boom. The statue exploded as a bolt of pure light energy shot off from the sword. The attack itself became rather weak as soon as it left Dorian's direct control, but was still more than enough to shatter a statue made of stone. Shudder, shudder. The world around Dorian seemed to twitch and shiver. Dorian smiled as he felt that his guess had been correct. The more he introduced concepts that shouldn't exist here, the more he would strain this dream. I command this dream to end. His voice thundered out loud as he infused it with the power of law, carrying authority and power. Shudder. Roar. A loud, raging roar caught Dorian's attention as he turned around, back towards the front of the pier, in the direction of the other fancy hotel. A huge, towering, lion had appeared, made of pure, rippling darkness, like a beast out of nightmare. Its body was still forming as it swarmed into existence, causing the sky above to darken. Raw, nightmarish power visibly swirled around the creature, giving it a huge presence. It was covered in scales and had a long, shadowy split tail that ended in fins, like that of a shark. Image. https://i.imager.com/05iwi.jpg. Doesn't open in app. Now that is more like it. A giant monster lion. Is it a Merlion? Singapore again. Dorian smiled as he saw this, recognizing it as a mythological creature famous to Singapore. He began to walk towards the very end of the dock, his eyes locked onto the creature. Instinctively, he knew if he killed this creature, he would escape this dream. Whoa, is that an optical illusion? Dude, look at that, is it made out of smoke? What the hell? Dorian ignored the random people that exclaimed around him as he focused. Roar! The lion roared again. As it yelled, a huge ball of darkness began to swarm into the air in front of its mouth, similar to the Hyperion beam attack that Dorian possessed. Copying some of my abilities, Let's see you copy this. Law of Valor and Greed, enhance me. Moving Force, activate. Expand, activate. Touching Light, stay active. Law of Wrath and Mercy. Combine into my sword. Dorian's balanced demon form expanded into a towering, 60 meters tall demonic creature. In this dream state, he seemed to be able to use all the abilities he had ever learned, even ones that had merged with others and he no longer had access to, like his expand ability. People shrieked in fear and terror as Dorian's behemoth figure made an appearance, like a demonic king out of legend. No matter how Dorian would try to describe himself, he looked exactly like how everyone would expect the villain to appear. A hideous, gargantuan demon that appeared as if it had dragged itself up from the depths of hell itself, wielding a massive blade of light in its hand. He even accidentally crushed a family underneath his foot, killing them instantly as he transformed. He made a mental apology towards them before berating himself again. This was just a fake dream, he hadn't actually hurt anyone for real. Monster, it's the devil, run away. On the bright side, at least the Law of Valor made him seem like an extremely brave and righteous evil demon. Die, beast. Dorian's yell caused a shockwave to form as he launched himself forward across the small gap of water, obliterating the pier and all the dream people on it. His body hurled through the air, crashing down upon the giant, ghostly lion like a meteor storm. Whoosh! The dark, ghostly lion swung its jaw down as it launched its own rendition of a black Hyperion beam, aimed directly for Dorian's sword. Black energy crackled and shook in the air, forming a shockwave that blew out the windows of the Grand Hotel the lion was standing next to. Boom! Dorian's blade of light cut the beam attack in half, his prediction of it accurate. He didn't allow himself a moment's rest as he continued forward, his enormous body, slamming into one of the towering hotels and obliterating it as he charged directly into the lion. Huge blocks of stone and wood exploded, leftover glass scattering into the air as hundreds of innocent dream people were thrown up into the sky. The horror and panic coming from the falling dream people felt so real Dorian almost apologized then and there, trying to explain himself. Shkkkk. His blade of light stabbed directly into the chest of the enormous creature. Immediately, flashes of black and white light swept across his vision and he felt the world around him seem to distort. The dream lion had been the core focus of the dream Dorian was in, raised to life to defend it when Dorian began to attack it. With its death, the entire dream began to cascade as it fell apart. Dorian blinked again. The world around him, once more, transformed. His mind, body, and soul all seemed to waver as his vision of a half-destroyed hotel and a dead Merlion was replaced with that of a wooden ship, where a good dozen martial artists lay on the deck, unconscious. Ah, holy High Lord, you escaped so quickly, despite being at the Lord class? You truly are an expert that can fight above his standard. A worried voice greeted Dorian as he came awake. The King-class mystic martial artist Fabian, the only warrior that was awake on deck. The flying ship had fallen still, hanging in space above the world bridge. How long was I out? Dorian immediately asked, standing up. He had fallen to his knees when he entered the dream zone. About 4 seconds, Holy High Lord. The attack just hit. Old codgers that have reached the King class are resistant to such attacks thanks to our mastery. For those at the Lord class, however, it can have a much greater effect. The mystic martial artist explained himself, nodding fiercely. No one else has attacked again or anything. Dorian replied, looking around the deck. No, sir. All right, we need to get these shades awake before we try to leave fully. I don't want to risk leaving them stuck in some type of permanent mental dream. The dream guide had talked a bit about how it was dangerous to transport anyone stuck in a dream away from Balians due to the possibility of leaving their soul eternally trapped. I agree, Holy High Lord. Only, even the dream guide has been caught. Only you, I, and the other 2 captains are still awake. The other two are tending to the Lord-class fighters below deck, trying to help them. We don't know how to help. Fabian responded, his hands held out to the side helplessly. How indeed, Dorian muttered, looking at the sleeping figures. He mentally ran over his available abilities, trying to come up with a plan. As he came upon one ability in particular, he smiled. I have an idea. His eyes flashed. Fabian, keep watch and guard the ship. I have a technique that might be able to help the fighters escape from the Dream Zone's trap with ease. My appearance will look odd, however. He spoke and acted quickly, not wanting to let any of the trapped shades fall victim to any attacks. Oh, a type of special technique? Of course, Holy High Lord. That makes perfect sense. Fabian took it for granted that Dorian had a solution, trusting his word immediately. He then went on guard, a powerful king-class aura rippling around him as he glared out at the undulating dream miasma. Dorian stepped forward to one of the downed fighters, a Lord-class shade at the middle of Lord-class. He closed his eyes, focusing. Wise Jade Dragon form, transform. Humanoid form, activate. His shade body blurred and was then replaced with a pale, jade skin-colored humanoid male, one with long, white hair and piercing green eyes. Calm Aura ability, activate. He activated an ability he had gained a while ago, but never put to use. An ability that was restricted to his Wise Jade Dragon form. Ability. Calm Aura, a peaceful ability that releases a soothing aura. This power can be found in bloodlines that have similar, calming natures. This aura dampens emotions, and does so by drawing upon the laws of the universe to form a large, invisible bubble that minutely affects the mental state of everyone within it. It also grants the user an air of peaceful elegance, shaping the appearance others see. Dorian felt a cool, peaceful aura spread out from around him. An aura that was relaxing, one that was calming and filled anyone in it with soothing strength. Come on, now, he muttered, testing the ability on the shades before he would run down and use it to help Helena. Wake up, Chapter 166, the second stage. Groan, as the cool, peaceful aura that Dorian spread swept over the downed shade martial artist, the shade shifted, moaning. The aura seemed to focus on this shade, infusing within his body. Normally, an aura like this could be seen as an attack if it tried to manipulate anything other than Dorian's appearance. The attack would be subtle enough that most wouldn't notice it and would only passively resist it. If their soul was weaker than Dorian's, they would fall victim to the effects of the ability. However, sufficiently strong souls could still resist parts of the effects, weakening it greatly. All of the Lord-class mystic martial artists here had powerful wills and strong souls. Dorian's calm aura would normally have only a slight effect on them. But because the unconscious shade was trapped in a dream world, his defenses were completely down. This was one of the chief dangers of the dangerous dream zones here. They could render an opponent unable to resist, leaving them open to a surprise attack. The 4 seconds that Dorian took to recover could easily prove fatal. What surprised Dorian the most, however, was that there was no other attack. I guess it really was just a random dream zone. We got unlucky. Probably my fault, he thought, shrugging. Whoosh! The energy from Dorian's calm aura finished suffusing the downed shade, and just moments later, the shade shifted in his rest. A moment after that, the shade's eyes flung open as it escaped the dream zone, looking around in confusion. Mama? Dorian ignored the confused babbling of the shade as the mystic martial artist tried to get his bearing, recovering from whatever dream he had been in. The aura works. All right, quick, I need to help Helena and everyone else on the ship. His eyes flashed as he looked around, noticing something. The ship was simply too big and there were too many people for him to use his aura in its current state to heal everyone. By the time he finished on the upper deck, it was more than possible that those down below, including Helena, could be fatally injured or dead. He couldn't afford to spend that much time. But if I don't, dozens will die because of me, he thought, blinking slowly. Calm aura, activate to the maximum, pour energy into it. Dorian began to focus on the calm aura ability, putting as much energy as possible into it. Normally, the bubble of aura would span about 5 meters in a perfect sphere. However, as Dorian poured in energy from his soul spell matrix, the aura began to stretch, its limit expanding. Whoosh! The aura spread to be roughly 8 to 9 meters in length. Its soothing effects spread to a couple of the other mystic martial artists, affecting them in their dream state. Gradually, they started to awaken, roused from the trap. It's not enough, Dorian thought, starting to worry. The law of greed affects the soul. Maybe it can help with an ability that is linked to the soul like this? Without questioning further, Dorian drew upon the law of greed, infusing its energy in the calm aura ability. Immediately, the aura grew in strength, maintaining its same smooth, relaxing sensation. The cool, supporting energy of the law of greed enhanced his soul, allowing him to extend the ability's effect. The aura also took on a slightly harsher edge, stimulating the greed of anyone within it. In this case, for the mystic martial artists and others under the effect of this aura, it had a minor, but beneficial, effect of stoking their desire to live. Everyone here wanted to survive, and that base greed to live was a powerful tool that couldn't be ignored. In just a few seconds, this aura spread throughout the entire ship. As it spread, however, the toll it forced upon Dorian's soul grew exponentially. Dorian immediately sat down cross-legged in a meditative pose, as he focused on maintaining the aura. He could feel the soothing power envelop everyone on the ship, calming them down and affecting their mental state. Dorian exhaled sharply as he held his pose, his eyes calm. He drew fully on the law of greed, relying upon it to make this possible. Fabian, meanwhile, turned and stared at Dorian in surprise before nodding, as if this all made perfect sense. The faith the aged martial artist put in Lord Inigo seemed to be enough that he took Dorian's odd appearance for granted, accepting it without questioning. Whoosh! Several seconds went by. Gradually, the various mystic martial artists and wizards on or below deck recovered, becoming fully aware. Some of them awoke while yelling, others amid violent twitches, while others were silent, coming awake with tears streaming down their face. One and all, however, awoke without issue, rousing from their dream state. Dorian's desperate efforts had just barely managed to save everyone, avoiding any fatal injuries or deaths. What? Are we under attack? Ready up, we're in a dream zone. Confused shouts echoed across the deck as the various fighters on top came aware. Dorian found that, as long as he maintained this expanded aura, he could also sense the presence of everyone on ship. It seemed to be a type of convenient, if energy expensive, side effect. He exhaled a second time as he released the aura, making his body shift back to his shade form as he felt everyone in the ship that was affected come awake. Immediately, without hesitating, he rushed over to the open door of the deck, running down below. He weaved between a few passages, dodging past several confused mystic martial artists or crew members until he found his cabin. Without hesitation, he burst in, slamming the door shut behind him in a smooth twirl. "Helena, are you all right?" He urgently spoke as he rushed to the bed where she was resting, concern bleeding into his tone. His eyes darted to see her figure, laying still underneath the covers. "I'm fine, you lunkhead. This type of trap can't affect my soul, even if it's withered. It can only work on those who haven't mastered a law." Helena's face was pale but collected as she made eye contact with Dorian, waving at him. "Oh, right. I just learned that, actually." Dorian sat down on the bed, his heart pounding as he almost collapsed with relief. Helena saw the worry and care he had for her, her eyes flashing with emotion. "Why is that, anyway?" he asked, taking several deep breaths. The effort required to spread his calm aura, in addition to the panic and worry he felt about Helena, had taken a toll on him. Achieving the king class means you have reached the culmination of understanding in a law. This advances your soul spell matrix to the king class level, which makes your soul much more resistant to outside influence. "It's just how it works," Helena responded. As she finished speaking, she reached out with a trembling hand and laid it on Dorian's back, rubbing it comfortingly. "Got it, I'm just glad you're okay." Dorian shrugged and smiled as he felt her trying to comfort him. If anything, he should be the one comforting her. "You aren't at the king class, you must have been taken into whatever trap it had laid." "What happened?" Helena questioned, her voice full of concern. The smile slowly fell from Dorian's face. "I saw my family," he responded, his voice quiet. "You did," Helena said, her voice catching slightly. "Yes, I told you how I have no family in this world, right? Well, I saw my family from my previous world. My mother, my father." Dorian's voice was calm as he spoke, the broiling emotion within still echoing in his heart. He may have let go of his past, but he couldn't just declare himself emotionless. I saw them, and I turned around and left them, without even speaking to them. He closed his eyes, taking a slow, ragged breath. That must have been hard. After a moment, Helena responded, her voice quiet as well. It was. It was very hard. It was the hardest thing I've done in my life. Dorian responded, his fists clenched. There was nothing more that he wanted to do than to hug his mother, to grab hold of his father, to tell them all about his crazy adventures, to let them know he was okay, to tell them how much he missed them. Dorian blinked, his memories disrupted as he felt a petite female form wrap around him, hugging onto him. I'm so sorry, Dorian, Helena whispered as she hugged him, grabbing hold of his chest. I wish I could have been there to help you. Her voice was strong and caring, full of warmth. Hey, it's okay, Smalls. I'm okay now. Dorian stopped clenching his fists and put on a smile, hugging her back. As he felt her warmth, he felt his heart seem to glow, the sadness and pain washing away. That's right, I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing this for you, too, Helena. He thought as he turned around and hugged her, looking down at her tired form. And once I get you healed and can get us away from here. He nodded with determination. I am going to ask you on a date. He made a mental commitment, though one that felt rather silly in their current situation. Wait, do people still ask people on dates in the 30,000 worlds? Do vampires even date? Oh geez. His thoughts were thrown into disarray. Boom. An explosion shook the air, causing the flying ship to tremble. Dorian clutched onto the bed to hold him and Helena steady as their cabin crashed back and forth. Everything was nailed down in the flying ship, thankfully, foresight from previous travels kicking in. What the? Dorian sputtered, his eyes widening. A powerful aura burst around him as he heard shouts from above. Attack! Enemy attack! His eyes narrowed as he stood up, energy running powerfully through his veins. Helena let go of him, her eyes filled with worry. Be safe, Dorian, come back in one piece. Helena's voice echoed out from behind. She laid back down on the bed, exhaustion setting in. Dorian turned around and smiled calmly, his demeanor calm and assured. Don't worry, I got this. You just get some rest, Smalls. I'll come back down in just a minute. Damn it, we were having a moment. I was hugging her. Whoever is attacking, you better be ready for a beating. His internal thoughts were full of anger and rage. Dorian jogged from the cabin, leaving Helena to rest as he rushed above deck. Be careful, Dorian, Helena muttered, her eyes misting. I don't want to lose you. I haven't even gotten the chance to ask you on a date yet. Her voice was a faint whisper as she fully laid down, closing her eyes as unconsciousness swept over her once more, her body reverting to its healing state, her faith in Dorian absolute. The great hero has arrived. Holy High Lord Inigo, Master Inigo. A deluge of voices called out Dorian's praises as he appeared on deck, his face a mask of anger. Fabian smiled and clenched his fists as he looked at Lord Inigo. The Shade's face was a mask of righteous fury and indignation. Fabian could practically feel the anger the Shade had for their attacker, his heart warming as he saw this. Lord Inigo was truly a Shade that cared for his brothers. Holy High Lord, the attacker is there. Fabian's body was covered in a rippling aura of might as he maintained his law of might to enhance his physical strength. He was currently standing at the forefront of the ship, deflecting black bolts of energy. Next to him were two other elderly figures. The king-class mystic martial artists Ira and Horbold, the powerful warriors that had joined Dorian's army, both at the early king class. All three of them practiced the law of might, a common law for physical martial artists to use. Boom, boom. Boom! 3 more explosions rang out as bolts of black energy slammed towards the ship and were deflected, unable to damage the flying artifact due to the powerful Shades defending. About 100 meters away, a vague shadow could be seen, floating in the air and lobbing these attacks. The few wizards in Dorian's army were currently lobbing spells at it, most of them fire or earth-based. A few of the more long-distance warriors shot bolts of energy via arrows or threw javelins, trying to take the shadow out, all to no avail. The shadowy figure seemed to dodge everything thrown its way. Osra, can you identify it? Dorian queried, his mind racing. No, Osra responded, her reply short and succinct. Everyone has awoken, including the crew members. Get this ship turned on and fly us out of here. Dorian's voice shook the air with authority as he gave his orders. Yes, sir. Immediately, Several of the martial artists on deck rushed below or towards crew members, trying to help and urge them forward. Meanwhile, the dream guide Walter rushed up to Dorian, his appearance disordered. "Holy High Lord," the man sputtered, catching his breath as he pointed at the vague shadow. "We must leave immediately. That shadow is part of a legend I am aware of that stalks Balians, a legend said to be a remnant of the mighty Dream Mentor's army itself. I have never seen the shadow personally, but have heard tales of it from unlucky others." Walter explained quickly, his voice a rush. "If we can get through the portal of the world bridge, it will be impossible for the shadow to follow or harm us. We just need to move over there." Walter pointed upwards, to where the world bridge connected into chaotic space. Dorian's eyes flashed as he heard and saw this. "Hurry it up, make haste." Kavoth, the third disciple of the Dream Mentor, frowned as he looked at the struggling ship. Slowly, ever so slowly, the flying artifact was starting to move, following the world bridge to escape. "Damn it, I've only managed to take control of 40% of this life year's dream zone. How in the world did they manage to escape the life dream?" He sputtered, his rage and irritation at an all-time high. He had never encountered an experience quite this annoying. It was ridiculous the luck these damned shades had. "I won't be able to take them all, not if it's like this," he muttered, looking up at his targets. He spawned in a few more black bolts from the dream miasma, lobbing them at the ship as he dodged a few attacks that were thrown his way. He didn't have anything truly powerful he could attack with, not that could get past those 3 King-class experts defending. They obviously couldn't hurt him either, but that didn't help him much. He shrugged, letting his anger go as he focused on his greater goal. Accomplishing his dream of resurrection. "I'll just take a couple of you instead," he thought, his eyes narrowing on the King-class defenders. "I should be just able to handle 2 of you." He clasped his hands together, the dream miasma in the air twisting and shivered as he commanded it to follow his will. Life Year's Dream Zone, activate fully. Living Year's Prison, go. Whoosh. What is he doing? Dorian muttered as he saw the dream miasma in the background twist and turn, shuddering and shaking. The dream guide by his side abruptly shook as well, his eyes widening in horror as an epiphany came upon him. "Holy High Lord, I recognize where we are and what is attacking us. It is a dream zone I've heard of before, the Life Year's Dream Zone. That is why we were trapped in our memories, everything makes sense." Walter quickly explained, his vast knowledge of the exotic world of Balians coming in handy. A ship previously managed to escape this dream zone after losing more than 9/10 its crew and passengers, many years ago. However, they described this particular dream zone as having one other stage, one that caused those that managed to survive the first stage despair. One that the living members only escaped through sheer luck as their ship moved on its own, pulling them out of it. Walter's voice was full of panic. Whoosh! The twisting dream miasma abruptly froze. No, what? In that moment, as it froze, 2 of the King-class martial artists that were helping Fabian protect the ship abruptly rose into the air. The movement was so jarringly quick that no one had a chance to grab hold of them or save them as they were flung upward. A millisecond later, a huge ball of spinning fog and light appeared, sucking in both warriors. This ball of light gleamed and glittered, wailing echoes sliding off it in a cacophony of horror much like that of the dream miasma. "And the second, and final, stage, Holy High Lord, is that." Walter pointed upward, his arms shaking. "A huge trap made of miasma and light, where one will be stuck for all eternity unless they escape. A trap where you cannot use energy or magic, where laws are useless and you have nothing but your soul." Walter finished, his voice small. "Dream Guide, how can we help them?" Fabian's voice was frantic as he rushed over, stopping his defense now that the shadowy figure had stopped attacking. Several of the other mystic martial artists rushed forward as well, their bodies throbbing with energy. "We can't just leave them here. We are so close. No shade left behind." A deluge of powerful voices throbbed in the air as the other shades agreed, staring up at the spinning ball in horror and fear. Walter seemed temporarily overwhelmed by the powerful auras that were present, raw energy glittering in the air, before he managed to control himself. He shook his head. "There is no saving them. This trap grows stronger and harder to escape the longer you have lived in the 30,000 worlds. Its mystical power is one that has killed King-class martial artists before. Even trying to help them would be suicide," Walter explained, shaking his head sadly. All the warriors let out groans or mutters of despair, sadness swarming over them. Slowly, the flying ship began to kick into gear, starting to escape. As all the other fighters became despondent, however, one shade was staring up at the ball of light and fog with interest. "Walter, you said the trap grows stronger the older you are?" Dorian's voice cut through the veil of sadness that had taken the deck like a knife through butter, calm and collected. The dream guide bowed as he turned, nodding his head. "Yes, Holy High Lord, this trap is one that builds off the time you have lived in the 30,000 worlds, one that entices and can ensnare even king-class figures. The longer your soul has lived in the 30,000 worlds, the stronger the trap will become, using the laws of the universe to grow far stronger than it would normally be able to obscene levels." Dorian nodded solemnly as he heard this, his eyes flashing with unknown thoughts. Abruptly, without warning, a mighty aura burst from Dorian as he redoubled his focus on the law of valor. He twisted fate further as he looked up at the orb, powerful might pulsing around his body. He even tapped into the touching light ability, causing a literal glow of light to appear around him. "Holy High Lord? Great Lord?" The shades all turned towards their commander, staring at him questioningly. Dorian began to walk forward, to the edge of the ship. He then stepped up on the edge, looking towards the giant sphere of fog and light. "No, Holy High Lord Inigo, you mustn't. The trap will rip you apart. We cannot afford to lose you." Fabian gasped, his eyes widening in horror as he realized what Dorian was about to do. "It's true, Great Lord, we cannot let you throw your life away. It is suicide. We want to save them too, but we can't risk you as well. They are lost, great hero. We all knew the risks when we signed up. They are as good as dead." The shades on deck all spoke up, their yells full of passion as they stared at Dorian's holy figure. Dorian looked at all of them, the valorous aura that surrounded him as strong as ever. He shifted slightly on the ledge, almost as if he was about to jump down. "I'm here on a mission. To vanquish the demons and to save my wife." Dorian nodded as he spoke, as if it all made sense. Relief filled the eyes of the onlooking wizards and mystical martial artists as they saw and heard this. But Dorian closed his eyes for a brief moment before opening them. "How could I look my wife in the eyes and say to her I let these good shades waste their lives before we even arrived on Moria?" A sad smile appeared on his face. "No, great hero, undying master, Lord Inigo." A deluge of hoarse yells greeted Dorian as he turned his back to the ship and prepared to jump, his shoulders hunched as if he was carrying a great burden. Before he leapt forward, however, he turned his head around. "My name is Inigo Montoya." His words shook the air, full of powerful, rippling authority. Every single one came out like thunder, full of strength and assuredness. "Wait for me, for I shall return." He jumped. "No, we are not worthy, great hero." Chapter 167. Charging into the trap. On a world far from Dorian, a large, circular room covered with a white dome ceiling could be seen. This room was enormous, so gargantuan it would dwarf any structure from Earth placed next to it. In sheer size, it measured at least 500 meters across and more than 100 meters from ground to ceiling. 12 large platforms could be seen set around the room on the edge, with a single large platform in the center. 3 of the platforms on the edge were occupied by a number of large, resting dragons of various colors and shades. The central platform had a pair of humans standing on it, one wearing a long green dress while the other wore a sharp white suit. They devour, they grow, they're vicious predators that must be stomped out immediately. The Red Wing tribe are fools for thinking they can tame one, and because of that, they're caught in between a battle between 2 of them. One of the dragons spoke out loud, its great golden chest rumbling. The drake had a very similar appearance when compared to Aiden, save that it was larger and more muscular, its scales slightly dimmed by age. "Dragon Master Kai, your observation is correct." The white-suited human standing on the central stone platform nodded his head, his face serious. His dark blue eyes gleamed, the serious look doing nothing to dim the handsome, almost feminine appearance that adorned his face. Soft red lips, pale skin, a pretty nose. If he wasn't wearing a suit, one might mistake him for a woman. The anomalies are dangerous and must be taken down. However, killing them directly is not a good answer. The more of them that die, the stronger the remaining ones will become. This is something we have determined through fate. The human explained, waving his hands animatedly. We appreciate your coming to offer assistance, Glaxon. We cannot allow another one of the tribes to perish. We've already lost the heavy-wing tribe. Our strength as a whole has already suffered tremendously. This time, the speaker was an elderly wise jade dragon, sitting with a delegation of their own, on a separate platform. Of course, Dragon Master Jorubai. My meteor department is one of the most offense-oriented departments in the Boral autarky. These anomalies have done great damage to the autarky. It is our duty to put aside our petty differences and join the battle against them. Glaxon responded, nodding again. Hear, hear, well said. Rumblings of approval from the onlooking drakes sounded off in the air as Glaxon finished speaking, his words smooth and convincing. We need more information before we declare war on these creatures. A third rumbling draconic voice broke in, this one slithering and rasping, full of concern and veiled threat. Dragon Master Poisel. Glaxon turned to look at the large, green-tailed Dragon Master. The drake had dark gray skin that seemed to blend in with its surroundings, save for a bright, almost vibrant green tail. Its gray scales were slightly mottled with age. A direct declaration of war is not needed. A simple hunting order, like what was given out for members of the demon race, would be enough. The autarky will work with the tribes to take down these vicious anomalies. Glaxon explained, his eyes calm and unintimidated by the fearsome auras the various drakes in the chamber gave off. A few rumblings from the fearsome dragons shook the air as discussion broke out. Several minutes passed as the various dragon masters debated and discussed. Their voices were harsh, each word sounding off with incredible might. As the discussion finished and died off, eventually an agreement was reached. A hunting order would be sent out, one with a mission to capture all known anomalies. All three tribes agreed to this, on the basis that no official declaration of war was made. Such a declaration would require more commitment than the green-tailed tribe was willing to give. Despite that, the hunting order, in and of itself, contained a large amount of authority. No alliances could be forged with targets of said order, and every tribe member would be obligated to fulfill it should they happen upon the target. As stated, the Boral autarky has several vendettas against these beasts. Specifically against the one that declared itself Zero, whom we believe to be the creature that wiped out the heavy-wing tribe. Department Head Glaxon spoke up for the Boral autarky as the drakes reached an agreement. On the condition that attempts are made to capture the beasts first, we will pledge our assistance. He solemnly made a binding promise. The Wise Jade Tribe, the Golden Flame Tribe, and the Green-Tailed Tribe all rumbled in agreement, the dragon masters of each respective tribe pledging their own support. It was a sight that would go down in history, an alliance between man and dragon, something that hadn't happened in hundreds of years. While it was only an alliance between three of the tribes, it was still very noteworthy. Most of the other tribes wouldn't even consider an alliance. Agreed, it is then. The Dragon Master of the Golden Flame Tribe stated, his voice shaking the air. He stood up, preparing to leave. Yes, it is agreed. The Dragon Master of the Green-Tailed Tribe added and stood as well. It is agreed. The Dragon Master of the Wise Jade Tribe followed suit. Now, before this convention is over, we have relevant intelligence we would like to share, in the spirit of our new alliance. Just as the drakes finished speaking, Department Head Glaxon broke in, his voice silky smooth. Oh, carry on, then. The Dragon Masters all sat back down, staring at the department head with a mix of curiosity and impatience. We have reason to believe that one of your own has come into contact with one of these anomalies. Glaxon explained. What? Who? How dare they? The Dragon Master of the Green-Tailed Tribe shouted out loud in surprise, anger filling his voice. The Dragon Master of the Golden Flame Tribe jumped in as well, his voice thundering. Yes, this is an affront to our kind, and a crime against the fallen Heavy-Wing Tribe. The Dragon Master of the Wise Jade Tribe broke in. We must reserve judgment. The hunting order was not active till now. It's possible they were unaware of the atrocities. The reactions of the three Drake Elders were mixed. All of them, however, zeroed in on Glaxon, the pressure the human felt reaching incredible levels. Department Head Glaxon acted as if it didn't bother him in the slightest, however, nodding his head seriously as he replied. It is actually a pair of dragons, great dragon masters. One from the Wise Jade Tribe and one from the Golden Flames Tribe. He continued, through fate, we have determined that they maintained extended contact with an anomaly. In fact, we even have record of them clashing with a pair of department vice heads, including word from the Diamond Wall himself. The department head of the Meteor Department turned to the side, his eyes focusing on two dragons that were sitting near each other. Aiden and Mira. Glaxon bowed. The two dragons, Aiden of the Golden Flame tribe, and Mira of the Wise Jade tribe. Almost as one, every eye in the room turned to look at the quiet pair. All three dragon masters turned, surprise on the face of the Wise Jade Dragon Master and the Golden Flame Dragon Master. Aiden, what in the heavens? The Golden Flame Dragon Master sputtered, at a loss. The Wise Jade Dragon Master was likewise confused. You two were off on a quest to seek out the lost remnants of the Wise Lady. How did you encounter an anomaly? Yes, tell us everything you know about the anomaly. Its weaknesses, its strength, its style. Where is it now? Does it have any allies, any family? The green-tailed Dragon Master broke in, his voice harsh. Dozens of powerful auras washed over Aiden and Mira, the duo visibly wilting under the incredible pressure. Even the human Glaxon stared at them, his eyes cool. Aiden stepped forward, holding his head and shoulders proud as he faced a legion of dragons without backing down, forcibly withstanding the huge pressure. Emotions flashed in Aiden's eyes as he thought of Dorian. He paused right before he spoke, as if collecting himself and making a decision. No, the being we traveled with was not an anomaly, but instead an inheritor of the Wise Lady. Aiden chose to lie. He wasn't a fool. He had fully realized, over time, that Dorian had to be one of the mysterious anomalies that existed. It was quite possible that he was related to the Wise Lady in some way, but the fact that he must be an anomaly had come clear as he learned more about the unique beings. If Dorian was an anomaly, then all of his powers and strength made sense. Dorian was a powerful figure in Aiden's eyes, a being that clearly outclassed himself in raw power. However, even that man would fall when faced with the overwhelming might that a hunting order would entail when assisted by the tracking capabilities of the Boral autarky. As he realized this, Aiden made a decision. He decided to protect Dorian. Oh, but we are quite confident in our intellig. Your intel is wrong. I traveled alongside him for quite some time and found him to be a capable and willing ally. Fate magic is notoriously unreliable. I can confirm that he is not an anomaly. Aiden doubled down. His reasoning was simple. The strange anomaly that had joined them had only ever shown the pride and honor that a true warrior should bear. Though he tried to hide it, Aiden could see the care he showed for his subordinate leader and could sense the complex emotions that held the man together. While their time together had been short and, if anything, contentious, Aiden had come to realize that Dorian was a man of his word. He had earned Aiden's respect. He did not gloat in victory, but instead showed compassion and kindness, while bearing forth with strength and skill. If he had been born a dragon, Aiden would have called him a true example of what any drake should aspire to be. Aiden was a simple drake, in some regards. He followed his heart, and to some, that made him a fool controlled by his emotions. If he gave Dorian up, in his heart, he would be a coward. And I, Aiden Flamestalker, am no coward. Are you certain, Aiden? The Golden Flame Dragon Master looked intently at him, sparks drifting from his eyes as a billowing aura wrapped around him. A powerful, pseudo-angelic aura that rippled with strength and power. The other Dragon Masters stared intently at him as well, their own auras thundering around them. Aiden felt as if he was about to be stepped on like an ant, so intense was the pressure and force weighing down upon his soul. Yes, he grunted, not showing a hint of emotion. That man is absolutely not an anomaly. Oh man, I love being an anomaly. Dorian thought as he blasted through the air, hurtling into the glowing dream zone trap in an instant. The yells of his subordinates on the ship were drowned out as the light and fog washed over him, blocking out everything else. In a literal instant, he found himself in a completely different area. A pure, endless plain of white spread out around Dorian. Faint white fog drifted up into a seemingly endless, but mostly clear, sky. It held a sort of ethereal feel, cool and peaceful. He landed down softly on some type of white ground, on this seemingly endless plain. The floor was soft and felt a bit like dirt. So this is the trap area, huh? Dorian muttered, looking around. He was still in his shade form, with his spatial ring and magic transforming clothes intact. He didn't feel like he was in the same type of dream state as before, however. His physical body was actually here, present in whatever this was. Where is the attack? He looked around expectantly. The moment Dorian entered the life year's dream zone, his soul was constantly being analyzed. The dream zone operated in a mystical way, using the inherent laws of the universe themselves to grow powerful, instead of relying on internal energy sources. By doing this, it was a trap that could function on its own, without a need to be constantly charged up. There were many advantages to this, but also certain disadvantages as well. One of those advantages was in how the trap was designed. The physically older the soul of the target, the stronger a backlash and reaction the laws of the universe would provide. Dorian's consciousness had spent accelerated time within his soul spell matrix, but that didn't affect the physical age of his soul. When Dorian heard about this from the dream guide, he had immediately made a decision. My soul has only existed in the 30,000 worlds for a few months at most. The decision was a no-brainer. The remnants of Euclid's soul might exist within him, but that wouldn't affect the actual age of his soul. He'd even managed to spin it as a brave and heroic sacrifice to maintain his image, taking advantage of the opportunity. Of course, he also planned on saving the two mystic martial artists if he could. But the fact that he could do this at very little risk to himself. Well, there was no need to spread that. As he looked around, he finally spotted something in the distance. A gray form that was zooming across the ground, charging right at him. It wasn't very large, about the size of a mid-sized dog from Earth. As Dorian got a closer look, his eyes focusing on it, he made a few observations. Is that a rabbit? A horned rabbit? He blinked. Asra, can you identify that? Scanning, no physical life forms detected. He frowned. Just like in the dream world, the creature that was rushing at him wasn't, apparently, a real being, but a manifestation of energy or something along those lines. It was a large, gray rabbit with a pristine white horn perched upon its head. Its fur was soft and plush, with a set of adorably tiny claws sticking off each paw. And it was currently bouncing across the foggy plain, charging directly at Dorian as if to attack. Well, this must be the attack. What if it's secretly a super powerful horned rabbit or something? Maybe the trap went by my soul strength and not my years lived. I better face it seriously. He decided to go all out, not leaving any room for error. Black-scaled rage dragon form. Go. Perfect body. Activate. Laws. Enhance me. Infuse into my attacks. Hyperion beam. Activate. Hyperion beam. Activate. Hyperion beam. Activate. Black flames. Swarm forward. Moving force. Activate. Dorian transformed into a gargantuan dragon, powerful might rippling off his body. He instantly went into his perfect body mode and drew heavily upon the various laws he was studying, gaining access to incredible strength. He then set off 3 Hyperion beams, keeping them focused on the rabbit, while he himself charged forward. He was just barely able to activate 2 other, simpler, abilities, his black flames which came naturally as a dragon, and his moving force ability which he had already seen a great deal of practice with. In just an instant, Dorian became a hellish creature of legend as 3 powerful lasers finished charging and melted forth with might that ripped through the foggy air, while a literal sea of black dragonfire ripped forth, followed directly by an enormous charging dragon whose every step caused greater and greater strength to blast forward. All of this focused directly at a tiny, almost minuscule in comparison, horned rabbit. Oh, a shade jumped forward to try and rescue his comrades? HMPH, merely Lord class, he is no threat. Kavoth dismissed the Lord-class warrior that had fallen into the trap alongside the other 2 King-class shades. Come on, now, Life Year's Dream Zone. Keep going steady, keep them trapped and begin to whittle down their defenses. The shadowy figure's eyes flashed darkly. He. This was a trap created by my glorious master himself. It is impossible to break, fools. Prepare to meet your maker. Chapter 168 Last Confrontation. Dorian's enormous combined offensive slammed into the Dream Zone's horned rabbit, and instantly disintegrated it. The poor horned rabbit didn't even have time to conceptualize that it was dead before it was obliterated with such totality that even the air near it was destroyed as well, for several dozen meters. Boom! Rippling explosions and black fire shook the air as the graceful white fogscape was ripped apart, bolts of energy and static flying in the air. Dorian's eyesight seemed to physically shiver as the world around him shuddered, unable to negate his attack. Oh, he snorted, his towering draconic form shrinking as he entered his balanced demon form and released his perfect body ability. Well, he scratched his head looking down at the damage he caused. A huge, gaping hole could be seen in the landscape, a hole that was jagged and cut into the air itself, like a hole torn in reality. I guess I might have gone a bit overboard. Ah well, rest well, good rabbit. He bowed slightly towards where the horned rabbit had once stood and then shrugged. Guess I'll go through it. He began to walk towards the rippling hole in reality, sensing the disturbed flow of energy pulsing around it. The shadowy figure of Kavoth looked down at the dream zone trap, his eyes confused. Living Year's dream zone? What is happening? He muttered as he stretched his hands forward, trying to sense the energy within the dream zone. Because he could only control roughly 40% of the dream zone, he wasn't intimately aware of its entire status. His master, the great dream mentor, had set far too high requirements to access his inheritance, even for Kavoth, his third disciple. Let me see, Kavoth muttered, closing his eyes. It seems to be related to the Lord-class fool that tried to save his comrades? He said in surprise. Kavoth waved his hands, black energy shooting off from them as he sifted through the chaotic energy flow of the dream zone, eventually managing to zero in on the part where Dorian had been held. A recording of what took place appeared within Kavoth's mind. He was trapped just like the others. Everything is looking normal. Wait, what? He's a dragon? Heavens above, and it sent a rabbit, a blasted horned rabbit, to fight a dragon? Wait, what's he doing now? He's shooting laser beams too? Dragons can do that, while charging and throwing up a sea of dragonfire? And the dream zone sent a rabbit to face this? The shadow figure spat up blood. Or, rather, it tried to, but once more remembered that it didn't actually have a physical body. And now he's escaping. No, he's still in there? Well, attack him again. Immediately. Man, that's the fourth horned rabbit already. How many of these things is it going to throw at me? Dorian muttered as he casually slapped out with his hand, instantly killing the horned rabbit that had charged at him from down the corridor. He currently found himself in a maze. After he tore through the reality of the dream zone, he had been released inside a literal maze of corridors, each one coated in flashing fog and light. Unlike the foggy dream area he had started in, the walls and ground of this area seemed to be actually tough to break through. Even when he charged up a Hyperion beam and imbued it with black flames, he was unable to do more than gouge the side of the walls. As a result, he opted to go through the maze like he was expected to. The white and gray walls, ceilings, and floor of the maze all went on without any change that Dorian could see, apart from the multiple twists, turns, and openings. No matter what path he took, Dorian felt as if he recognized nothing. However, with his jade memory at his disposal, Dorian was able to tell that every path he had taken so far was indeed unique. He had made a total of 27 different turns, all without having to turn around. This maze is huge, he thought, wiping the remains of the horned rabbit off his hand as an afterthought. Despite these creatures not being real, according to Asra, they still bled and died as if they were living beings. I feel like I'm not making any progress. While he could utilize his jade memory to great effect, if the maze was big enough, it didn't matter that he could memorize where he'd been, he'd still remain trapped in here. If only I knew which way to go. He muttered out loud as he came upon an intersection. He paused as he saw something new charging at him in the distance, coming down one of the paths. Is that? No, it's finally not a horned rabbit, he exclaimed as he saw the beast thunder down the pathway, aimed right at him. The fog swished and swayed as the creature rushed, bearing down on Dorian. It's a two-horned rabbit. Dorian sent out a light push. The two-horned rabbit exploded, killed instantly. Why do you keep sending out rabbits, you stupid Life Year's dream zone? Why? Since when is a two-horned rabbit equal to a maze boss? The shadowy figure tried to pull out his hair in insane frustration, but was once more foiled by his incorporeal form. He screamed in frustration at the dream zone, tears of remorse and anger trying to appear. But failing, he was still a shadow. Huff, huff, Kavoth wheezed despite not having lungs, or a need to breathe, as he looked at the glowing ball of light and fog, slowly regaining control of his emotions. It's fine, at least he's still trapped in the inner maze. He won't be able to break through it, and it's simply impossible he'd find the one path that leads to the core matrix. Everything is okay. He slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Wait a minute, what is he doing now? Well, here goes nothing. Dorian shrugged as he looked at the two-sided coin and then back up at the two diverging paths. Heads I go left, tails I go right, he said aloud, nodding his head confidently. He had no idea where he was supposed to go. The maze was insanely complex and huge. Trying to find his way through it by looking for clues or hints was probably the smart idea, but also felt incredibly boring. Why not just cheat through it instead? I command you to show me the right way. Come on, fate, show me that anomaly luck, he thought as he flipped the coin in the air. He pulled on his soul to twist fate, feeling a couple hundred points of energy vanish. Whoosh! The coin shivered and flipped over several times as it soared through the air before, eventually, landing on the floor with a resounding clink. Heads, left it is. Dorian scooped it up cheerfully and, without hesitation, began to jog down the left path. Everything looked basically identical to him. Foggy ground, foggy wall, foggy ceiling. But he smiled as he ran down it, feeling confident. Ha 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 ha, to think I got so worked up over such a fool. Flipping a coin to determine which path to take. Ah ha ha ha. Kavoth clutched at his sides as he watched this, feeling as if he was regaining control of his emotions. To let such a small number of events affect him so much, perhaps he really was getting too cooped up after living here for so many years. Ah, that felt good. I needed that, thank you, foolish shade. He patted himself off, breathing deeply. Another turn here, sounds good. Oh, this way? Okay, magic coin. To the right, to the right. Lemme drop it down low, turn left on the up row. 20 turns later. Oh, the passageways seem to have gotten a little brighter? Dorian observed with a smile. Better keep going. What? No, how can this be? He's actually getting closer to the exit. No, I will not allow this. Kavoth sputtered in anger, his incorporeal eyes flashing. He began to pull some of his focus away from containing the two king-class mystic martial artists in the trap, instead turning the free energy towards Dorian. If I can't use the Life Year's Dream Zone to attack you, I'll do the next best thing. He muttered, his hands twitching. I'll trap you. Oh? Dorian paused as he looked at the coin he had flipped and then at the intersection he had appeared at. He was making incredible speed through the maze, using the powerful physique his balance demon form possessed to make fast dashing progress. It landed on its side. He muttered, frowning. The coin he was flipping was a random small piece of currency he had obtained when picking up supplies before heading to Magmoor. It was a simple piece of gold with the head of an old man wearing a crown on one side, and a large chariot drawn by a horse on the other. But, instead of landing on either side, it was currently standing on its edge. What does that mean? He scratched his head in confusion. Abruptly, his eyes lit up. Ah, is this one of those freaky mazes that can change its routes on you, like those staircases in Harry Potter? He thought, his eyes shining. He scooped up the coin, looking behind him. You want me to go that way? He flipped the coin again. Tink. The coin landed down on the ground, flipping over a few times before settling. Once more, landed on its edge. Good enough for me. He snagged the coin and turned around, starting to jog backwards. What? How is it possible? I literally just started messing with the turns. What? He did it again? Wait, he went the right way without turning around this time? How is he doing this? He can't keep getting away with it. After about 20 more turns, Dorian smiled with satisfaction as he found himself at a large, glowing white doorway. He was in a large, circular room that seemed to be the exit of the large maze, one that looked decidedly different than the monotonous foggy walls he had grown accustomed to. Good job, lucky coin. You really did me a solid. He patted the coin in his hand, giving it a slight bow. One last flip. Should I go through the doorway, coin? Heads if yes, tails if no. He muttered. He flipped the coin. Tink. It landed on tails. Oh? He exclaimed in surprise, staring. He looked at the glowing exit, and then back at the coin, shrugging. What should I do? Should I turn around and go back through the last corridor? Flip. Tink. Heads. All right, sure thing. Dorian shrugged a second time and turned around, using his lesser magnetic manipulation ability to make it fly into his hand as he ran back the way he came. Whoosh. The moment he stepped into the corridor, and out of sight of the portal, his entire body vibrated and, Abruptly, he vanished from the maze. He had managed to escape from it. Life Year's Dream Zone, why are you the way that you are? Kavoth looked at Dorian's figure as he successfully made it out of the maze, entering into the last section of the Dream Zone. The core matrix, the central and most vulnerable area in the Dream Zone, where only the controller should have access. A place where the two other targets, the King-class mystic martial artists, were currently being held. The fact that he had managed to, somehow, impossibly, make it through the maze in record time, even dodging every single trap and illusion he placed down, somehow tricking past the maze itself. It's not fair. Kavoth felt as if he was about to tear up from frustration. He took several deep breaths, trying to gain control of his emotions. I can't direct the core matrix area to target him since he came in on his own. Kavoth closed his eyes slowly. His entire shadowy body shook as he stared at a vision of Dorian. Dorian was currently prancing around the core matrix, humming to himself as he looked around. The core matrix was shaped like a large manor with several rooms connected by short tunnels. It was only a matter of time before he found his two king-class subordinates. How dare you desecrate Master's Dream Zone, you filthy mongrel? The shadowy figure's body blurred as he shot forward into the ball of light and fog, chasing after Dorian. He temporarily pulled back a large part of the energy he had been directing to fully restrain the two king-class fighters. With that pulled away, the experts would have a real chance of escaping their respective traps, even if they were ancient warriors. After all, the trap had no exact direction without him guiding it. Old monsters like those at the king class would usually be able to escape, even with the odds stacked against them. I will personally wipe you out. His voice was quiet, but full of determination. And I will steal that lucky coin, too. Chapter 169 Escape. Oh, they aren't in here. But this area does feel important. Dorian muttered as he looked around, his eyes gleaming with interest. He had appeared in what seemed to be a large mansion or home, full of rooms that were connected by long white corridors. The walls were covered in lines of flashing energy, giving everything an eerie appearance. Right in front of Dorian was a large, glowing yellow globe. Sparks of energy fluttered off this orb as it slowly turned, rotating. He could sense a calm, peaceful aura rolling off from it. I might not be able to find them quickly if this place is as large as that maze, so I might as well destroy anything that looks important. He shrugged. Touching light, activate, whoosh. A blade of pure, concentrated light appeared in his hand, incredibly potent heat concentrated all in its glimmering length. He began to walk forward while holding this blade out, at the ready. Here goes nothing. Dorian plunged the sword made of light downward. Swish. Creak. Boom. The orb exploded after letting out a rattling shriek, knocking Dorian backwards several steps as a geyser of energy shot out of it. The air around Dorian rocked with vibrating waves of energy as Dorian tore apart an important part of the Dream Zone's core matrix. Dorian blinked. Abruptly, all of a sudden, he could sense his surroundings much clearer. When he had first entered this core matrix, he'd found it very difficult to detect anything. His balanced demon form had incredibly powerful senses, but he found that he couldn't sense anything beyond what he could physically see. Now, however, he could feel much farther, able to sense the laws of the universe around him with clarity. In particular, he could sense two powerful sources of energy that were throwing up huge waves, as if they were in the midst of intense battle. Ah, my two loyal subordinates. Captains. What are their names again? Dorian hadn't actually had any extended interaction with them. He searched his perfect memory for a moment, trying to place them. Ira and Horbold, that was it. Ira uses two swords while Horbold uses his fists. Both study the law of might. He mentally recited, once more thanking his jade memory. To think that so many powerful shades would pledge their loyalty to my cause despite barely knowing me. They must really need or want a hero, huh? He silently observed. He didn't fault them, however. It would be unreasonable for anyone to believe Dorian was faking it at this point, not with the strength and actions he had shown. Even he himself was inclined to believe in the legend of the great hero Lord Inigo. Okay, let's see. I think I'll go this way. He began to walk towards one of several corridors that branched off from this now mostly destroyed room. In the direction he could sense the two trapped king-class mystic martial artists. As he moved, Thunderbolts full of rippling energy slammed into his body, raw power flung about as a result of the damage he had caused. His mystic armored body ability blocked most of the damage. The passive ability was almost always turned on, while his powerful balanced demon form could ignore the rest. Whoosh, boom, boom. The chaotic scene was one that would have terrified him back in the earlier days of his arrival in the 30,000 worlds, but now, it couldn't cause him even the slightest bit of fear. Hup! He burst into the corridor and began to jog down it, escaping the range of the fluctuating energy storm behind him. As he moved, he rapidly felt himself approaching the locations of the two mystical martial artists. The white corridors and walls now shook slightly, as if the damage Dorian had done had permanently destabilized them. Hup, hup, he moved quickly through two separate rooms and down two more corridors. Both the rooms he'd entered had little in the way of furniture or anything important looking. At the least, nothing he thought was worth destroying. Soon, he found himself almost on top of the energy emanations that were coming off his two subordinates. As he reached this point, his eyes flashed, as if in preparation of danger. This would be the ideal time for someone to attack me, he thought, going on full alert as he entered one last corridor. At the end of the long hallway, he could faintly see a room giving off bright blue light. Instinctively, he knew that the two trapped king-class shades were located in this room. He jogged forward slowly, his every step slow and foreboding. His heart pounded as he ran, his entire body tensed up. Well, that was easy, he exclaimed in surprise as he reached the end of the corridor with a shrug. That had been rather anticlimactic. Why is the maze all mixed up? What in the heavens did he break? Kavoth managed to cry tears of dark shadowy essence as he tore at where his hair would have been if he was alive, glaring at the maze that was spread out around him. He had somehow managed to trap himself in the maze. The path he had originally planned on taking now completely changed. He must have broken the core centralizer. The maze will fall apart once he releases the two trapped warriors and it no longer has a reason to be active. I'll have to wait till then. Kavoth rubbed his eyes, glaring at the shaking maze. He walked over and punched the wall to little effect, frustration and anger overwhelming him. How can one being be so lucky? It must be that damned coin. I must obtain it. Kavoth wrung his hands as he spoke, his rage and greed warring with each other. His number one desire was to resurrect. This loss, while frustrating, was only a temporary setback. If he could get a hold of that lucky coin artifact, however, he could see this turning into a huge boon. He had never heard of an artifact that could affect fate itself. Yet, it seemed clear that the coin that Shade had flipped was some type of mysterious artifact. The fact that the Shade could transform into a dragon must be related to some type of mysterious artifact as well. The mysteries that Shade held, Kavoth darkly vowed to unfold them. Quote. He muttered incomprehensible words dourly as he settled down on the ground to wait, deciding to not pointlessly run through the maze. Yeep! A sound drew Kavoth's attention as he turned to look down one particular corridor, his eyes flashing darkly. A small, two-horned rabbit could be seen, poking its head around the corner. The two beings exchanged glances. Die immediately, you useless rabbit. Oh, wow, so many crystal balls. Dorian muttered as he looked around the room, his eyes narrowing. He was standing in a mid-sized room, examining it with interest. The floors, roof, and walls were similar to the corridors, misty white and gray. What interested him most, however, were the dozens of floating crystal balls, almost all emitting a soft blue light. Two of them stood out from the rest, however, giving off a warm green color. And it was from these two orbs that he sensed the presence of the two king-class Shade warriors. Dorian immediately walked up to them, his eyes intent as he studied them. When he was standing right next to them, it almost felt like he was standing right next to each of the two shades. He could sense the powerful aura of might that those that studied the law of might could emanate, a powerful aura that made all of their movements or attacks carry deadly strength. But they aren't here, he muttered, raising his hand up. He lightly tapped on one of the orbs. As soon as he touched it, nothing happened. Well, all right, he frowned. He pushed the orb. It flew off about half a meter in the air before bouncing back to its original position, its light unchanged. How do I get them out? Should I just break it? He tapped on the orb a few times, as if it was a touchscreen from back on Earth. As he now expected, nothing happened. Hold on a second, An idea popped into Dorian's mind as he looked at all the glowing orbs. These orbs probably all contain some amount of energy, right? They kind of remind me of various artifacts. As he spoke out loud, he walked up to one of the glowing blue orbs, one where he couldn't sense the energy of the two mystic martial artists. If that is the case, he rested his hand on the glowing orb. Absorb. WHOSH. Instantly, the orb disintegrated. At the same time, however, he felt a large store of energy flow into his body, increasing his growth points at a fast rate. As the orb fell apart, the walls seemed to shiver and shake, trembling. He smiled. Now that is something I can make use of indeed. A short while later, Dorian smiled as he looked at his handiwork. The entire room was almost devoid of the previously plentiful orbs, looking oddly empty. The last two orbs were the ones that held Dorian's subordinates, ones he wasn't quite sure what to do with yet. The more orbs Dorian destroyed, the more unstable the room, and the dream zone, felt. He could tell that these orbs were rather important to the makeup of the dream zone, and his damage to them was causing serious issues for it. But, well, he didn't particularly care. It wasn't his dream zone after all, and the more murder traps he broke, the merrier in his opinion. Balance Demon. Growth Stage, 3/3, Elder Demon. Growth Progress 2,187,122/0. A bit more than 2 million growth points, huh? He smiled with pleasure as he looked it over. He had won it big this time. Not only had he gained a new law to add to his collection, but he had also gained a massive store of growth points. The amount of energy each orb had within it was humongous. It was as if they had been passively absorbing energy from the laws of the universe for hundreds of years and were full of power. That's enough energy to evolve so many forms. If I can get a high-class bloodline, I should be able to evolve it fully too. This is excellent. Growing his forms was one of his best ways to grow in strength. I need to diversify my forms as well, to maintain my future potential. He had gradually sensed that he was starting to hit a limit in terms of power new forms could give him. After all, one could only grow so powerful in terms of physique. At least, when going by normal metrics, though Dorian was anything but normal. I can also use this energy to recover from any injuries that are too damaging. While he always had his constant regeneration ability active, it was also possible to remake injured body parts through the use of growth points. The cost to do so was usually quite significant, especially if law remnants were left behind, but it was always a good option to have. If he got enough growth points, in fact, it was possible for him to become functionally immortal. In the midst of his rejoicing, however, his attitude became serious again as he zeroed in on the two orbs. "How'd I get you two out?" he muttered, staring. Shade form. Time to switch back over. He quickly returned to his normal, heroic shade form as he began to prepare. If I absorb the orbs, would I absorb the two warriors as well? He had a mental image of his body fused with the old lady and old man that were trapped in the orbs. It was not a pleasant sight. No, I can only absorb artifacts or sources of energy this way. Those two should only be absorbable by that powerful spell that was left on my soul spell matrix. He nodded. It made sense. With that in mind, he stepped forward to the two orbs, resting a hand on each one. Without hesitation, he issued a mental command. Absorb. Whoosh. After a brief instant of resistance, the two orbs fell to ash. Surprisingly, he didn't get any energy from them. All the energy associated with them seemed to have been mostly spent, with what was left vanishing as he broke each orb. Dorian's heart dropped for a brief second as he noticed this and felt the emanations of his two subordinates vanish completely, as if they were dead. A moment later, however, they reappeared, this time from somewhere that felt much farther away. They must have been teleported out. Dorian instinctively realized, somehow able to detect that when he broke the orbs, that was where they vanished to. Somewhere outside of the dream zone. Oh, he exclaimed, looking down at the floor oddly. The ground itself was distorting, white energy rippling up from it. He blinked as the entire world around him seemed to twist and shiver. Whoop. WHOSSH. Before he could finish exclaiming, Dorian vanished, teleported to a spot outside of the dream zone and well out of the core matrix as the entire dream zone collapsed, falling apart. Kavoth's eyes flashed angrily as he looked to the left and right, swearing. Damned rabbit. Be glad you managed to escape my sight. Otherwise I would have annihilated your entire ancestry. He muttered darkly. Abruptly, the shadowy figure turned and stared at the now quivering walls, a small smile appearing on his face. Ah, you've managed to break Master's life year's dream zone. His voice was oddly quiet as he spoke. Dark energy began to gather around the shadow, swarming with black light. The power of some mysterious law began to circle him closely as he spoke, growing stronger and stronger. I hope you're ready to die. Hundreds of shadows began to pour out from Kavoth's vague eyes, surrounding him in a powerful, dark glow. A raw, king-class aura caused the air to tremble around him as he finished speaking. Shadow magic. Dark globe. The wavering shadows sank down and concentrated into the shape of a deathly still shield, one that gave off an unsettling feeling. Because I am going to kill you as soon as I see you. Whoosh. The quivering walls collapsed as the dream zone fell apart. Kavoth teleported away, hot on Dorian's heels. Chapter 170 Arrival on Shaptal. Dorian blinked a second time. Oh, I'm back outside on the world bridge? He looked around, finding himself standing on the ground of the world bridge that connected the normal world of Shaptal to the exotic world of Balians. Great Lord, Almighty Hero. Two elderly voices echoed forth with a feeling of might, but also exhaustion, as two shades ran to greet Dorian. Ah, Captain Ira, Captain Horbold. I managed to rescue you after all. Dorian's demeanor switched to a graceful, authoritative one as he looked at the two shades, a small smile on his face. He drew upon the law of valor as usual to bolster his appearance. He made sure to make use of the passive exuberant grace ability he had gained when he added the ancestral vampire form to his collection back near the fort city of Suttner, using the ability to great effect as he walked forward smoothly. His every step was one of elegance and beauty. Thank you so much, great hero. I will never forget the favor you did for me today. Captain Horbold slammed his fists into his chest as he bowed, his voice emotional. His movements were sure, but also tired, bespeaking the effort and trials he had been through. Likewise, great Lord of the Shade. I will bear this favor forever in my heart. Captain Ira's voice was passionate. Lord Inigo did it. He rescued them. Abruptly, from above, Dorian could make out cheers and yells raining down upon them. Several hundred meters above them, a large flying ship could be seen, floating in the air. Dorian smiled as he saw it, feeling quite cheerful. Oh man, that was almost too easy. Dorian waved grandly up at them, smiling cheerfully. Abruptly, a sixth sense he had picked up over his time in the 30,000 worlds seemed to go off and he spun around. A feeling of intense danger appeared, one that drained the mirth off his face in an instant. Perfect body, activate. Almost without thinking, he activated the powerful incomplete divine ability, the world around him losing some of its color as his physique grew immensely stronger and his perception of the world became enhanced. At the same time, he drew upon the law of valor to further boost his physique. Die. A ragged voice that sounded as if it was drawn with exhaustion sputtered as, less than a fraction of a second later, darkness swarmed over Dorian's vision. Great hero, almighty savior. The two king-class mystic martial artist captains yelled out loud in shock and horror as an enormous globe of shadow surrounded Dorian completely. Whoa! Dorian felt his mystic armored body ability react as black energy slammed into every part of his body, trying to erode and dissolve him. If he hadn't had the ability active and had been a regular expert, it was likely that the energy would have melted into the more vulnerable parts of his body, like his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Even the greatest experts were vulnerable to surprise attacks. Unless one had a powerful and rare defensive artifact always active or some type of defensive spell always turned on, it wasn't possible to be constantly on guard. If the attack had landed on either Captain Ira or Captain Horbold, either of them would have suffered tremendously and likely died. Even for Dorian, the black energy was extremely corrosive and proved a massive drain on his energy, his mystic armored body barely holding it back. Some of it still managed to leak through, though the small remnants couldn't harm him in his valor-boosted perfect body state. Ow, damn, this really hurts. How do I stop this? His mind raced as he felt the sting of the black energy. It felt like his entire body was on fire, burning his outer skin. He was stuck floating in the air, unable to jump off anything. Everyone is here, I can't just transform into something huge to try to escape. Further, that might not even work, I have no idea where this surprise attack came from. I heard someone yell, "Die," at me? Dorian's mind raced ahead of him as he reacted. His perfect body ability let him process thoughts at an abnormally fast speed, meaning he ran through all of this in less than a fraction of a second. As he felt the energy singe him, Dorian could sense remnants of the power of law within it. At his level, unless an attack was either overwhelmingly powerful or imbued with the power of law, it was impossible for it to hurt him. As he sensed that, he could vaguely recognize what law it was from, able to sense the general feel of it given that the attack was surrounding him. The law of shadow. Just as he was really starting to directly sense the law, similar to how he'd felt his other laws, an odd sensation flashed out from his soul. The various laws he'd studied seemed to glow brightly in his mind, energy from them overwhelming the sensation from the law of shadow. As these energies clashed, they seemed to chase away any chance he had at detecting the law enough so that he could study it. This hadn't happened with the previous laws he'd gained. It seemed that, because of the interrelated nature of his current laws, he was able to just barely detect other, related laws. But laws that weren't related to his, he couldn't detect at all, at least not in a way that he could add them to his repertoire. Shadow? Hold on a second. If this attack depends on the law of shadow to operate, an idea jumped into his head as he smiled. He held out his hand to the side. Touching light, activate. He activated the unique ability of a lightsworn fox. WHOOSH. A large sword made of pure, blinding white light appeared in Dorian's hand. This blade immediately melted through the darkness and shadow that surrounded it, blazing into existence with abandon. What? The voice that had yelled out at him when the attack appeared sputtered up a response again as the globe of darkness that had trapped Dorian imploded, light bursting through and incinerating it. In a split second, Dorian tore apart the darkness trap, reappearing like a figure out of legend holding a blade made of pure light. Great hero, forgive us for doubting you, of course you would be fine. Lord Inigo is mighty and great. Both captains bowed deeply as they saw Dorian reappear, their voices apologetic. Their eyes were glued to Dorian as they bowed, however, drinking in the sight of the heroic figure he cut with abandon. Dorian merely smiled, waving it off. Fear not, brave citizens. I shall quash this vile darkness and allow us to move forward with ease. The Shade captains and the Shades on the rapidly descending flying artifact all cheered out loud, apparently ignoring the fact that they were all technically related to darkness due to the inherent nature of being a Shade. In a small window that stood in the lower section of the flying artifact, if one looked closely, one might see the figure of a pale, female vampire rolling her eyes as she watched Dorian's theatrics. As Dorian said this, he spun around, holding his sword made of light up in the air. For nothing can trample on the glory of the Shade race. Everything shall fall before my mighty lightsaber. He yelled grandly as he glared at the direction of the attacker, and where he had heard a voice call out. A vague, shadowy figure could be seen, black energy wrapped around it. This figure had seemingly appeared out of nowhere, perhaps teleported here like Dorian and the captains had been. A lightsaber? Up on the deck of the flying ship, Fabian looked down at the heroic stance Dorian had cut with admiration and a hint of confusion, rubbing his head. Isn't that blade in the shape of a regular sword? It doesn't look like much of a saber to me. He shook his head. The Holy High Lord's techniques are too abstruse for me to see through. The onlooking Shades all nodded in agreement, their opinion of Dorian impossibly rising even higher. How dare you desecrate the Master's dream zone? The shadowy figure of Kavoth shook as it glared at Dorian. And how are you casting a light magic spell? I specifically checked and confirmed there were no light wizards here before coming over. Kavoth spat out loud accusingly. Unfortunately, Dorian didn't actually hear any of that. He was too engrossed looking up at the approaching Shade and the two captains nearby, making sure they fell for his plot. Nice job, I've definitely got them on my side now. Even if Helena gets revealed, they won't try to murder her. As long as they believed in him, he could explain everything. Maybe I can even help stop the war between the two powers. He thought, his heart hopeful. The last thing he wanted was for Helena to have to live through another tragedy. She had already been through far too much. Her entire life had been one of her obsessively training to grow strong enough to kill the Wizard King, with little care for the joys of life. Dorian's attention snapped back towards the shady figure in front of him, however, as the darkness-wrapped being seemed to snap. Are you ignoring me? Do you know who I am? Kavoth's entire body shook, as if the past few minutes of his life had been one of unspeakable torment. I am the third disciple of the almighty Dream Mentor. Kavoth the Dark Strider, the slaughterer of Lamamstone, the breaker of Halloway, the master of Shah. All right, calm it down, great killer of lemons. Dorian cut him off, shaking his head sadly. You shouldn't pretend to be what you aren't, young Shadow, even if you manage to take control of this abandoned dream zone. Dorian rebuked him sorrowfully, shaking his head and acting the part of a wise hero. That is a path that only leads to defeat and pity. He sighed, speaking from the heart. Of course, such advice didn't apply to himself. Still, for other people, it was advice they should stick to. Indeed, everlasting Lord Inigo, your words are full of wisdom. The elderly female king-class mystic martial artist Ira nodded her head as she spoke up in agreement. As you say, great hero, a faker will always be found out in the end. The other king-class expert, Horbold, added, also in agreement, his aged voice echoing with might and wisdom. All the shades aboard the flight ship nodded in unison, taking Dorian's words to heart. In the window on the lower side of the ship, a vampire could be seen throwing her hands up into the air in exasperation at Dorian. Yo, you mongrel. The shadow vibrated so much it seemed to transform into a spirit of light for a moment. Right after, it immediately rushed forward at him, powerful black glow writhing around it. Die and give me that lucky coin. The shadow's voice was filled with insanity, any grasp it had on reality apparently fled. Whoosh! Dorian sighed again. Alas, the truth comes out. He shook his head sadly a second time. Nothing more than a petty thief. Dorian stepped forward, slashing forward with his sword made of light. He didn't even bother to imbue the attack with the power of law, already able to foresee the outcome of this attack. The blade was a magical weapon that held heat so concentrated it was equal to the strongest dragonfire in existence. This shadow was merely a petty thief that was controlling whatever remnants this dream zone had left, in his eyes. Whoosh. Boom. His current physical state was one that could battle king-class foes on even footing. Given that his weapon had an extreme advantage over the attacking foe, the result of the clash could only be expected. The shadow was sliced in twain, raw energy flowing out from it in a wave. The wails of tortured souls and great gouts of black energy shot off into the air as Dorian cut down the foe in one smooth motion, without hesitation. Whoa! Dorian felt his mental state twitch as the black energy and screaming washed over him. It seemed to be some sort of final attack, a release of some powerful tortured soul trying to damage his own soul. Sigh, young shadow, even in death, you must not give in to greed. Dorian shook his head righteously. Law of greed, reinforce my soul. The departing shadow energy seemed to shiver, as if it was trying to cough up blood in rage and frustration at Dorian's words and actions, as it dissipated. Instead of vanishing like one would normally expect, however, the dissipation seemed to transport the split shadow far away, the remnants of the life year's dream zone helping send it away instead of letting it perish. The shadowy body Kavoth was forced to use was nowhere near as powerful as his physical body had been, even with his ability to tap into the law of shadow. However, because of his unique physique, as long as he remained within range of the dream miasma or his master's dream zones, at any time when he was in mortal danger he could teleport away to anywhere on the exotic world of Balians. The teleportation had a stiff cost and would send him into a deep sleep for several days, but it was more than worth it to save his life. Dorian's strike had surpassed Kavoth's expectations once again. The once mighty third disciple of the Dream Mentor had known Dorian's sword of light was powerful when it broke apart his dark globe. But he had had no idea how powerful it actually was. The fact that it was as mighty, in raw heat, as the strongest dragonfire in existence was not a fact that could be ignored. The sword that Dorian wielded contained concentrated light energy that was hotter than the surface of the sun, roughly equal to 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 5,500 degrees Celsius. Even without imbuing the power of law into it, the raw temperature was not something that could be easily defended against. It was so agonizingly hot that conceptualizing the raw power of that heat was difficult. The fact that it was self-contained and kept the heat within the blade was the only reason Dorian could wield it. There was a reason the draconic tribes were widely respected and feared despite their very small numbers. Dragonfire was simply far, far too dangerous. Even Dorian's middling black flames were considered a lethal weapon. When the blade melted into Kavoth as he angrily rushed forward, his unforgiving rage getting the better of him, he had instantly realized his mistake. Unfortunately, it was too late for him, and his body was split in two. Thankfully, he didn't actually have a body. He was just a shadow, something he was grateful for once. Rejoining back together wouldn't be too difficult, not for an expert of his caliber. However, he took substantial damage from the attack and immediately retreated, realizing that Dorian was practically a perfect counter to him. He vanished away, leaving the area immediately without any last words. He was out of Dorian's sight, though, and that was enough for Dorian. The irritating energy was washed away as the soothing power of the law of greed settled into the deepest parts of his soul, leaving him completely unscathed. Dorian then turned around, holding his sword up high. "The darkness has been vanquished, brave shades. We are victorious." His voice boomed with authority and might. "Great hero, praise. We will follow you till death itself." Woo! Internally, Dorian winced as the warriors all let loose extremely loud cheers. What happened to them all being quiet? Even when they'd cheered before, they'd kept it relatively muted because of Helena. Fabian seemed to pick up on this as he turned and glared at all the cheering shades, his powerful king-class aura shaking the air itself. "Keep it down. We must allow the great hero's wife peace and quiet so she can rest," he whispered quietly. However, because his aura of might was imbued into his words, when whispered, it felt far louder than the cheering shades. "No, you're even worse. Don't act like you're helping. Your aura is way more noticeable." He sent an annoyed glare Fabian's way as the flying ship reached the world bridge ground level, right next to Dorian. Fabian seemed to mistake Dorian's glare for an approving smile, and he nodded respectfully back at Dorian, a smile on his face. "It is a pleasure to serve in your army, Lord Inigo," he whispered, his voice once more shaking the air itself as waves of power rolled off of it. "Onward, to Shaptal," Dorian groaned. It was going to be a long trip. A few days later, Leader took a deep breath, smiling as he took in the fresh air of the ocean. He looked around the beach shore, putting away his magic flying artifact. A feeling of danger and power could be sensed around him, one that fluctuated as he turned his gaze off to a towering world bridge just a few dozen miles away. "The world bridge to Moria. I'm finally here." His voice was cool and collected. As he looked at the world bridge, he clenched his fists. "Bastard that dares to claim he would wipe out my race and destroy these hallowed ruins. I hope you are ready to die." His words carried with them a grim foretelling of the future as he took a few steps forward. "Lord Inigo, prepare yours." Rumble. Before Leader could finish speaking, a loud rumbling noise interrupted him. He looked down at his stomach mid-speech in surprise. "Oh right, I've become abnormally hungry as of late thanks to my growing strength. I suppose I can go hunt some food first." He licked his lips, rubbing his stomach. "But after that, I'll come find you and then you die." Leader shook his fist at the world bridge to Moria for good measure, sending it a glare, before he turned away from the beach. His gaze landed on a forest that was set nearby, looking through the underbrush. "Ooh, is that a horned rabbit?" 15 laughed maniacally as he stepped off the world bridge, looking out at the surprisingly not really forbidding landscape in front of him. His current form was that of a gray manter, vague and unassuming, almost impossible to spot even when one was looking directly at it. A colorful landscape full of flowers and trees, with warm sunshine shining down on the swaths of healthy grass that spread out across the land. A large mountain range could be seen off to the left, while a large plain, full of more flowers and trees, stood directly in front. Vaguely, in the distance, a castle could be seen, set several dozens of miles away from the world bridge. "I have arrived here again, oh sweet Moria." 15's body shook and twisted as he transformed. His body stretched and grew giant, completely warping into that of a towering, 30-meter tall demonic being. It was gargantuan, covered in huge muscles and green scales. The air around it pulsed with a demonic aura, giving it a terrifying appearance. His greater throne demon form. "Come to me, my fellow demons." As he yelled out loud, his voice gained a powerful air, one that was oddly convincing. It echoed with authority and power. A voice that twisted through fate itself, actively manipulating reality, just like Dorian. "A brother of mine is coming here to die. Ha 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 ha. We must properly receive him. The seemingly normal exotic world of Moria seemed to shiver, its colorful and warm appearance trembling slightly, a foreboding aura spreading out. Inner peace, inner peace. Oh, is that a pie I smell? Ahem. Cough, cough, inner peace. Excelsior Gaiman shook his head, trying to regain his focus as he sat in meditation. He was currently wearing a set of ragged clothing, covered in dirt and grime. He had the appearance of a beggar, one that was sitting haphazardly on the side of a street. Specifically, the main street of the grand city of Kraktal on Shaptal. The city that every expert that was intending to cross into the exotic world of Moria or attend the superior auction that was hosted here would have to stop by. Several times guards had tried to shoo him away, but he always managed to mysteriously reappear, sitting quietly as he observed the world around him. Those pies smell really good. One of the strongest beings within the Shade Commune glanced to the side shiftily as he looked at a large shop that was set up near him, the Grand Dios Bakery, selling a variety of baked goods. One of the baker's apprentices turned a beady and suspicious eye upon Gaiman, noticing his salivating glance. Gaiman immediately turned away, as if he hadn't been looking at all. Inner peace. Get here already, Lord Inigo. Inner peace. Whoosh. At last, Dorian muttered, his bloodshot eyes looking down the world bridge towards the glowing portal he could finally see. He covered his ears slightly as he spoke, tears appearing at the corner of his eyes. I can finally get some peaceful rest. As he muttered this, his eyes widened as he realized several of his captains and subordinates were standing on deck near him. Cough, onward, to save my poor wife and wipe out the demons. Woo, praise Lord Inigo, praise. He'd made it to Shaptal.